The moment Caleb Reed spoke, the entire room went silent. Not because he raised his voice, he never did, but because the words that came out of his mouth just exposed a $47 million disaster waiting to happen. The same men who'd been laughing at his flannel shirt and calloused hands 60 seconds ago were now staring at blueprints they thought they understood. Marcus Lang, the man in the $3,000 suit who'd called Caleb just a mechanic, had gone pale. And Victoria Hale, the woman who'd spent 3 months watching this quiet father from across a bar, finally understood why silence could be the loudest thing in the room. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Caleb's story travels. The bar was called Sullivan's, and on Thursday nights it belonged to a particular breed of men, the kind who wore their accomplishments like armor, designer watches that cost more than most people's cars, ties that whispered Italian silk, shoes so polished you could see your reflection judging you back. They gathered here after the markets closed, these architects of commerce and masters of deals, to celebrate victories and plot conquests over aged whiskey and craft beer that cost $14 a glass. Caleb Reed didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. He sat at the far end of the bar on a stool that had seen better decades, nursing a beer that cost $4 and nursing it slowly because that $4 mattered. His flannel shirt, navy blue, fraying slightly at the cuffs, had been washed so many times the fabric had gone soft in a way that only comes from actual wear, not manufactured distress. His jeans were clean but faded, and his boots were the kind built for function, scarred with the evidence of actual work. His hands, wrapped around the beer bottle, told stories his mouth never would. Calluses earned, scars collected, nails that would never quite come clean no matter how hard he scrubbed. At 42, Caleb had the kind of face that could have been anywhere from 35 to 50, weathered not by excess but by responsibility. His hair, dark brown threading with gray, was cut short because it was practical. His eyes, a deep brown that caught the light from the bar's Edison bulbs, had a quality of stillness that most people found unnerving. He didn't look around much, didn't check his phone every 30 seconds, didn't seem to need the validation of constant motion that filled the room around him. He'd been coming here for 3 months, always Thursday nights, always the same stool, always alone. The first few weeks, he'd been invisible. The bartender, a young guy named Tommy with aspirations of mixology greatness, had served him with the efficient indifference reserved for customers who wouldn't tip in percentages high enough to brag about. The suited crowd had flowed around him like water around a stone, present but irrelevant. But invisibility has an expiration date, especially in places where everyone else is performing. It started small. A comment barely audible from a cluster of men in their 30s discussing a property acquisition. One of them, glancing at Caleb, had muttered something about the help getting lost on their way to the dive bar down the street. His companions had laughed, not cruel laughter exactly, but the thoughtless kind that comes from people who've never had to consider whether they belong somewhere. Caleb had heard it. His jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, but he hadn't turned around, hadn't responded, had simply taken another sip of his beer and kept his eyes forward. That non-reaction became its own kind of fuel. The next week, the comments got louder, more deliberate. Marcus Lang, 6'2", swimmer's build maintained by a personal trainer he mentioned frequently, hair styled in that way that's supposed to look effortless but requires 3 products in 20 minutes, had been the one to escalate it. "Hey, buddy," Marcus had called out, voice carrying that particular frequency of confidence that comes from never being told no. "You lost. The Moose Lodge is 2 blocks over." His entourage had erupted. Actual shoulder-slapping, knee-slapping laughter. The kind that feeds on itself, gets louder because everyone wants to be part of the moment, wants to signal that they're in on the joke. Caleb had turned then, slowly, and looked at Marcus with those still eyes. Hadn't said a word. Just looked at him for 3 full seconds, long enough for Marcus's smile to flicker slightly, uncertainty bleeding through before bravado recovered, and then turned back to his beer. "Strong silent type," Marcus had announced to his audience. "I respect that. I respect a man who knows when he's outclassed and just accepts it." More laughter. Tommy the bartender had looked uncomfortable but said nothing. This was the crowd that ran up tabs in the hundreds. Caleb's $4 beer didn't buy intervention. But here's what none of them saw. What none of them could have seen because they'd never learned to look. Caleb Reed wasn't there to belong. He was there because it was the only place open past 9 o'clock within walking distance of his apartment that wasn't a fast food chain. He was there because his daughter Emma, 12 years old, and everything that mattered in his world, had a strict bedtime of 8:30 on school nights, and after he'd checked her homework, made sure she'd brushed her teeth, kissed her forehead, and turned out her light, the apartment felt too quiet. The silence pressed in with memories he wasn't ready to face. Of his wife Sarah, 3 years gone to cancer, whose laughter used to fill those rooms. He was there because staying home meant sitting in that silence, and he wasn't strong enough for that yet. But he was strong enough to sit in a bar where people mocked him, to let their words slide off like rain off waxed canvas, because he'd survived things that would have broken every single one of them, and their opinions didn't even register on the scale of things that could hurt him. The men in suits saw weakness. What they were actually looking at was a kind of strength they couldn't comprehend. Caleb worked at Morrison's Auto Repair, a shop that had been family-owned for 40 years before the family sold out to a regional chain that kept the name for brand recognition. He'd been there for 18 years, starting as a kid fresh out of high school who was good with his hands and didn't have money for college. He'd worked his way up to senior mechanic, then shop supervisor, positions that came with tiny pay increases and massive increases in responsibility. He was the guy they called when no one else could figure out what was wrong with a car. The diagnostic wizard who could hear problems in an engine the way a concert pianist could hear when an orchestra's second violin was slightly out of tune. He'd turned down 3 offers to manage other locations because managing meant office work, paperwork, being away from the actual fixing of things. And it meant less predictable hours, which meant less predictable time with Emma. Emma, who was surviving 7th grade with the kind of quiet determination she'd inherited from him, who got herself up in the mornings, made her own breakfast because Dad had to leave for work at 6:30, walked herself to school because they couldn't afford the neighborhood with the bus route, who came home to an empty apartment 3 days a week and did her homework without being asked, microwaved the dinner he'd left for her, and was always in bed by 8:30 because she knew it mattered to him. She was the reason for everything, every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of swallowing his pride, while men who'd never built anything with their hands treated him like scenery. The money he made, $52,000 a year, which had seemed like a fortune when he started and now barely covered rent, food, clothes for a growing girl, school supplies, the medical bills from Sarah's final year that still trickled in, didn't leave room for extras. Thursday nights at Sullivan's, that $4 beer, was his one indulgence. 2 hours of being somewhere else. Somewhere he could watch other people's lives from a distance and remember that the world was bigger than his grief and his exhaustion. He never expected anyone to understand that. Certainly never expected anyone to see it. But someone did. Victoria Hale had first noticed Caleb on a Tuesday night, which was unusual because she almost never came in on Tuesdays. Thursdays were her night. The night when she allowed herself to decompress after 70-hour weeks of building an empire in a city that chewed up ambitious women and spit out cautionary tales. She'd been coming to Sullivan's for 5 years, long enough to have watched the clientele shift from old money real estate families to new money tech bros to the current crop of finance guys who thought disruption was a personality trait. She came because her penthouse apartment, despite its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, empty. Victoria was 45 and looked like she'd been carved from ambition and expensive skincare. Tall, blonde in that way that cost money to maintain, always in clothes that announced competence before she said a word. She was the founder and CEO of Hale Properties, a commercial real estate firm that had grown from a one-woman operation run out of a studio apartment to a 50-employee company managing a portfolio worth north of $300 million. She'd gotten there by being smarter than the men who underestimated her, more ruthless than the women who saw her as competition, and more willing to sacrifice everything else: marriage, friendships, hobbies, sleep, joy, at the altar of success. At 45, she had everything she'd worked for and nothing she actually wanted. That Tuesday, she'd come in because she'd just closed a deal that should have felt like a victory. 8 months of negotiations, a mixed-use development in the warehouse district that would transform 6 blocks of industrial decay into luxury condos and street-level retail. The kind of project that got featured in magazines, won awards, generated wealth. The kind of project that felt hollow when you celebrated it alone. She'd been sitting in her usual spot, not at the bar, but at a high-top table near the window where she could see the street and the bar both, when she noticed him. The man who didn't fit, who sat so still he seemed to create a pocket of quiet in the noise. What caught her attention first wasn't his appearance, but his complete lack of self-consciousness. Everyone else in the bar, herself included, was performing some version of themselves. The finance guys performing dominance. The younger women in cocktail dresses performing availability. Tommy the bartender performing craft. Even she was performing, the successful woman who'd chosen career over conventional happiness and had no regrets. Definitely no regrets. Completely fine with this choice. But the man in flannel wasn't performing anything. He was just present, drinking his cheap beer slowly, watching the television above the bar, some baseball game he didn't seem particularly invested in, with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to be and was okay with that. She'd found herself watching him, curious in a way she hadn't been curious about another human being in years. The following Thursday, she'd arrived at her usual time, 7:30 p.m., late enough to have left the office after everyone else, early enough to get her preferred table, and he'd been there again. Same stool, same beer, same flannel shirt, or one identical to it. That's when she realized it was a pattern, and Victoria Hale had built a career on recognizing patterns. Over the next several weeks, she'd watched him with the same analytical attention she brought to property assessments. Observed the way other men in the bar treated him, the dismissive glances, the occasional comment loud enough to carry. Observed the way he never reacted, never engaged, never seemed bothered. Observed the way he checked his phone exactly twice each visit, once when he arrived, once about 45 minutes in, looking at it with an expression of such concentrated tenderness it made something in her chest ache. She'd seen him smile at whatever was on that phone screen, had watched him type responses with his calloused mechanic's hands moving carefully over the screen, the same precision he probably brought to engine work. Had witnessed the way his entire face softened, years falling away, showing the man he must have been before whatever weight he carried had settled on his shoulders. And she'd wondered, with an intensity that surprised her, what it would be like to be the reason for that expression. The night Marcus Lang decided to make Caleb his personal entertainment, Victoria was running 20 minutes late. A last-minute call from a contractor who'd found unexpected complications that would cost an extra $200,000 to fix, complications that she suspected weren't unexpected at all, but rather an attempt to renegotiate after contracts were signed. She'd handled it with the cold efficiency that had made her reputation, promised a meeting first thing Monday where they would discuss the documentation of these complications in detail, code for "bring proof or I'll bury you in litigation," and hung up already planning her legal strategy. By the time she walked into Sullivan's, she was wound tight, ready to fight, carrying the armor of fury she wore so well people often forgot there was a person underneath. And then she saw Marcus, surrounded by his usual pack of followers, standing next to Caleb's stool, like a predator who'd found prey too easy to bother killing quickly. "Just saying, man. You've been coming here for months, and I don't think I've ever heard you say more than 2 words, Marcus was saying, voice pitched loud enough for the entire bar to hear. Strong silent type? Or is it that you just don't have much to say? Caleb was looking at his beer bottle, rotating it slowly on the bar, condensation leaving a ring on the wood. His expression was neutral, almost peaceful, like he was alone. See, my theory, Marcus continued, warming to his audience's attention, is that you're one of those guys who peaked in high school. Star of the football team, maybe? Quarterback? And now you're just this. He gestured vaguely at Caleb. Living in the past, unable to accept that the glory days are over. One of Marcus's friends, a shorter man with the kind of facial hair that suggested he thought it made him look distinguished, chimed in. Or maybe he's just here to see how the other half lives. You know, aspirational, trying to absorb some success by proximity. They laughed, that same thoughtless, feeding on itself laughter. Victoria felt her hands clench. She'd spent 20 years in rooms where men like Marcus operated, had developed sophisticated strategies for dismantling their egos in professional settings. But this wasn't professional. This was recreational cruelty, and it made her furious in a way that bypassed strategy and went straight to instinct. She was 3 steps toward them, murder in her eyes and legally actionable words forming on her tongue, when Caleb finally looked up. "I didn't play football," he said quietly. Marcus blinked, genuinely surprised to get a response. "What?" "Football. I didn't play." Caleb's voice was low, calm, matter of fact. "I worked at my uncle's garage after school, learned to rebuild transmissions when I was 15. "Oh well, excuse me," Marcus said, recovering quickly, playing to the crowd. "I stand corrected. Not a has-been jock. Just a regular blue-collar guy who stumbled into the wrong bar." "No," Caleb said, still in that same calm tone. "Right bar. It's close to my apartment. Open late. Quiet enough." "Quiet?" Marcus looked around theatrically. "Buddy, I don't know if you've noticed, but this place is—" "You're loud," Caleb interrupted gently. "The bar's quiet. Big difference." The group went silent. Marcus's smile froze, uncertain whether he'd just been insulted. Victoria, still standing 3 steps away, found herself holding her breath. "The thing about noise," Caleb continued, still not raising his voice, still rotating that beer bottle with mechanical precision, "is it's usually trying to cover something up. Silence makes people uncomfortable, makes them feel like they need to fill it with—" He glanced up at Marcus, just for a second. "Whatever this is." "Whatever this—" Marcus's face flushed. "Listen, friend, I don't know who you think—" "I think I came here for a beer," Caleb said. "I think you came here to feel important. We both got what we wanted. You can go back to your table now." It wasn't aggressive, wasn't confrontational, was delivered in the same tone someone might use to give directions to a lost tourist. But something in it, the complete absence of fear maybe, or the way Caleb said it and then simply returned his attention to his beer as if Marcus had already ceased to exist, hit different. Marcus stood there, mouth working, trying to find the comeback that would restore his dominance. His friends shifted uncomfortably, no longer sure whether they should be laughing. And Victoria Hale, who'd seen thousands of negotiations, hundreds of power plays, decades of men trying to establish dominance in rooms where she refused to submit, recognized something she'd rarely witnessed. Someone who genuinely didn't care about winning because he wasn't playing the game. Marcus eventually retreated to his table, saying something loud about not worth it, and some people, that was designed to save face. His group rallied around him, manufactured some laughter, ordered another round. Within 10 minutes, they'd found a new topic and convinced themselves the interaction had gone differently than it had. But Victoria couldn't let it go. She'd spent the last several weeks watching this man from a distance, constructing theories, staying safely in observation mode. Now, still carrying the adrenaline from watching him be degraded, still angry on his behalf in a way that felt uncomfortably personal, she made a decision that surprised her. She walked to the bar and sat down 2 stools away from him. Caleb glanced over, a flicker of something, surprise maybe, crossing his face before settling back into neutral. "Tommy," Victoria said, not looking at the bartender, keeping her eyes on Caleb. "I'll have what he's having." Tommy knew better than to comment on Victoria Hale ordering a $4 domestic beer. He got the bottle, set it in front of her, took her card to start a tab. They sat in silence for a full minute. The baseball game on TV showed men running, throwing, catching. Neither of them watched it. "Thank you," Caleb finally said. Victoria looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For being about to intervene. I saw you. Coming over." His mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile. "You looked ready to commit violence." "I still might," Victoria said. She took a sip of the beer, trying not to show how much she hated it. "He's a client. I've wanted to commit violence against him for 6 months." "Marcus?" Caleb's eyebrows raised slightly. "He's in real estate?" "Partner in Lang Development. They do residential mostly, cookie-cutter subdivisions marketed as luxury communities." Her voice carried the professional disdain she usually kept hidden. "Everything built to minimum code, maximum profit." Caleb made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been something else. "I'm Victoria," she said, extending her hand across the empty stool between them. He looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was solid, rough with calluses. warm. Caleb. Nice to meet you, Caleb. She held his hand perhaps a second longer than professional, felt him notice but not pull away. Even if I've been watching you for 3 months. That got a reaction. His eyes widened slightly, and something that was definitely a smile touched his face. That's either very flattering or very concerning. Depends on your perspective. She released his hand, took another diplomatic sip of terrible beer. I've been coming here for years. You notice patterns. You were a new pattern. Patterns. He seemed to consider this. Is that a real estate thing? It's a survival thing. The words came out more honest than she'd intended. You learn to read rooms, read people, figure out who's a threat, who's an ally, who's just taking up space. And which one am I? Victoria looked at him properly then, really looked. Saw the exhaustion he carried carefully, the way his shoulders held tension like it was structural, necessary to keep him upright. Saw the lines around his eyes that came from squinting at engine parts and laughing at a child's jokes and crying when he thought no one could hear. Saw a man who'd been dismissed by every person in this bar and somehow remained exactly himself. You're the first interesting person I've seen here in 5 years, she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not opening exactly, but softening, like he'd been braced for something else and was recalibrating. I'm a mechanic, he said, like it was a confession or a warning. I know. I have a daughter. She's 12. I assumed the kid from the way you check your phone. I can't afford the beer you usually drink. I can't afford to drink it either, in any sense that matters. She smiled, felt it reach her eyes for the first time in weeks. I'm just very good at pretending. Caleb studied her, those still eyes taking in information she hadn't meant to share. You don't seem like someone who needs to pretend. Everyone's pretending something. She gestured around the bar. Marcus pretends his family money was his own brilliance. Tommy pretends craft cocktails are art. These women pretend they're here for the atmosphere. She paused. I pretend I chose this life instead of just winning it by default. The honesty surprised her. She didn't talk like this. Didn't reveal herself to strangers in bars. Didn't admit to doubts or regrets, or the creeping sense that she'd optimized for the wrong variables. But Caleb had that effect. That quality of stillness that made confession feel safe. What do I pretend? He asked. You don't, she said immediately. That's the problem. That's why they hate you. You're not performing anything, and it makes everyone else's performance obvious. He thought about this, rotating his beer bottle. I'm too tired to perform. No. She shook her head. You're too honest. They sat with that for a moment. The bar noise continued around them. Marcus's table had moved on to discussing cryptocurrency. The women in cocktail dresses were taking selfies. Tommy was explaining the notes in some bourbon to customers who weren't listening. Why do you come here? Caleb asked. If you hate it? I don't hate it. I hate my apartment more. The words came out flat, factual. 2,200 square feet of architectural digest excellence that feels like a hotel room I'm living in temporarily. Except the temporary part has lasted 8 years. Why not move? Where? Another expensive space that doesn't feel like home? At least this one has good light. She heard the bitterness in her voice, tried to soften it. Besides, successful women don't admit their personal lives are disasters. We're supposed to have it all figured out. Do successful men? Victoria laughed, actually laughed. Have you met Marcus? Caleb's smile reached his eyes this time. Fair point. They talked for another hour. About nothing in particular and everything that mattered. About the weight of responsibility and the terror of failing the people who depended on you. About the way exhaustion became so familiar you forgot what energy felt like. About the small victories that got you through. Emma's report card. A deal closed properly. A problem solved. A dinner made. Caleb talked about his daughter with a tenderness that made Victoria's chest ache. About how she was braver than he'd ever been. More resilient. How she'd handled her mother's death with a grace he still couldn't comprehend. How she'd learned to be independent because she had to, but was still 12 and scared sometimes and needed him to be steady even when he was breaking. Victoria talked about her company with a complexity she rarely allowed. about the pride she felt in building something real, and the shame she felt about some of the compromises she'd made along the way, about projects that were technically successful but morally questionable, about the way profit margins could justify almost anything if you didn't look too close at the human cost. "Do you regret it?" Caleb asked. "Building your company?" "No," Victoria said immediately. Then, more honestly, "Sometimes. When I'm eating takeout alone at midnight in my office, yeah. When I close a deal that makes me richer but not better, yeah. When I realize I can't remember the last conversation I had that wasn't transactional." She trailed off. "But mostly, no. It's mine. I made it. That matters." "It does matter," Caleb agreed. "Emma's mine. I made her. Well, half made her. But I'm raising her, and that's—" He stopped, struggling for words. "That's the only thing I've done that I'm sure about. Everything else could have gone different. But her? I show up for her. Every day. That's not negotiable. She's lucky." "No," Caleb said quietly. "I'm lucky. She gives me a reason to stay upright." Victoria understood, perhaps for the first time, what she'd been watching all these weeks. Not weakness. Not defeat. Not a man who'd given up. A man who'd found the one thing worth fighting for and had arranged his entire life around protecting it. At 9:30, Caleb checked his phone and stood. "I need to go. I tell Emma I'll be home by 10. She doesn't sleep if I'm late." "Same time next week?" Victoria asked, trying to sound casual, not desperate. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'd like that." He left cash on the bar, exact change for one beer, no tip because he couldn't afford it, and walked out into the night. Victoria sat there for another 20 minutes, drinking the terrible beer she'd ordered, thinking about patterns and choices and the way certain people could walk into your life and quietly rearrange what mattered. Across the bar, Marcus was still talking, still performing, still desperately filling silence with noise. And for the first time in 5 years, Victoria Hale felt like she'd actually seen someone. Really seen them. Not their performance or their polish or their professional value, just them. It felt like waking up in a room where she'd been sleepwalking for years, finally seeing the furniture she'd been walking around in the dark. Outside, Caleb Reed walked the 6 blocks to his apartment building, past the closed shops and the late-night convenience store and the corner where Emma's school bus stopped every morning. He climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again and unlocked the door to an apartment that smelled like the spaghetti he'd made Emma for dinner. Her door was cracked open, nightlight casting a soft glow. He looked in, saw her buried under blankets, hair spread across the pillow, breathing the deep rhythm of genuine sleep. Safe. His daughter was safe. He went to his own room, got ready for bed, set his alarm for 5:45 a.m. because tomorrow was Friday, and Fridays were always busy at the shop. And just before sleep took him, lying in the bed he'd once shared with Sarah, in the apartment they'd chosen together when Emma was 2 and the future seemed solid, he thought about the woman with the expensive clothes and the lonely eyes who'd sat next to him and talked like they were the only 2 real people in a room full of ghosts. Thought about the way she'd looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him, like he was worth seeing. He fell asleep thinking that maybe Thursday nights had just become something other than just getting through. Maybe they'd become something to look forward to. And in her penthouse apartment, Victoria Hale sat by her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at a city she'd helped build, drinking wine that cost more than Caleb's weekly grocery budget, and felt the first crack in the careful numbness she'd cultivated for years. Felt something that might have been hope, or might have been fear, or might have been both. Felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, interested in tomorrow. Not for a deal or a victory or another acquisition, but for a conversation with a man in a flannel shirt who checked his phone at exactly the same time every visit and spoke the truth so quietly it hit harder than shouting ever could. The city moved around them both, millions of people living millions of lives, connected and separate, loud and silent. And 2 of them, without meaning to, without planning it, had just started becoming something neither of them had been looking for. Something real in a world that specialized in performance. Something that would change everything, though neither of them knew that yet. Not on that Thursday night. Not yet. The following Thursday, Caleb arrived at Sullivan's at exactly 7:45, the same time he'd been arriving for months. The routine mattered to him in ways he didn't examine too closely. Shower after work, change into clean clothes, kiss Emma goodnight, walk the 6 blocks while the city transitioned from day to evening, claim his stool before the after-work crowd got too thick. But tonight felt different. Tonight he'd checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror before leaving, had noticed the gray threading through his hair, and wondered if it made him look distinguished or just old. Had put on his newer flannel, the green one Emma said brought out his eyes, instead of the usual navy. Had felt something in his chest that might have been anticipation and might have been anxiety, and was probably both. Victoria was already there when he walked in, sitting at her usual high-top table by the window, but her eyes found him immediately. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant, and lifted her drink in acknowledgement. Caleb nodded back, felt his own mouth curve upward, and headed to his stool. Tommy was there before he sat down, already reaching for the $4 domestic. "Your usual?" the bartender asked, but there was something different in his tone. Respect, maybe? Or curiosity? Like Caleb had shifted from scenery to actual customer in the week since he'd quietly demolished Marcus Lang's ego. "Yeah, thanks." Tommy set the bottle down, and this time he didn't immediately walk away. "Hey man, I just wanted to say what you said to Marcus last week. That was perfect. Guy's been coming in here acting like he owns the place for 2 years. Someone needed to check him." Caleb looked uncomfortable. "Wasn't trying to check anybody, just wanted to drink my beer in peace." "I know, that's what made it perfect." Tommy grinned and moved down the bar to serve other customers. Caleb had taken exactly 2 sips when he felt someone settle onto the stool next to him. He knew without looking that it was Victoria. Could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that probably had a French name. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He turned to face her, felt that same little jolt he'd felt last week when he'd really looked at her. She was wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that looked soft enough to be cashmere, her hair pulled back in a way that showed the elegant line of her neck. Professional but not armor, like she'd left some of her defenses at the office. "I was going to play it cool," Victoria said, a smile playing at her lips. "Wait at my table. Make you come to me. But I've spent 20 years playing games and I'm tired of it." "I don't know the games anyway," Caleb admitted. "Wouldn't know how to play if I wanted to." "That's refreshing." She signaled Tommy, ordered a beer, the same cheap domestic Caleb was drinking, and when it arrived, she held it up, to honesty in a room full of performance. Caleb clinked his bottle against hers gently. To Thursday nights that don't feel like work. They drank, and Victoria didn't even try to hide her grimace at the taste. Caleb found himself laughing, actually laughing, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "You don't have to drink that," he said. "I know you hate it. I'm building character." She took another sip, shuddered. "Or destroying my palate. One of the two." "Why'd you order it then?" Victoria looked at him directly, those sharp green eyes holding his. "Because I wanted to sit here, and sitting at the bar alone drinking a $20 cocktail while you're drinking a $4 beer felt like everything wrong with my life in one image." The honesty of it landed between them, heavy and real. "Your life doesn't look wrong from where I'm sitting," Caleb said carefully. "Looks like you built something most people only dream about." "Yeah, well, dreams and reality rarely match up, do they?" She turned the beer bottle in her hands, mimicking his habitual gesture. "I built an empire, but empires are cold, and you can't have a conversation with a portfolio." Before Caleb could respond, a voice cut through the bar noise, loud and deliberately carrying. "Well, well, look who's slumming it tonight." Marcus Lang stood 3 feet away, drink in hand, that same performance smile plastered across his face. But there was something different in his eyes, something sharper, meaner. He'd spent a week nursing the wound to his ego, and he'd come back ready to reassert dominance. Victoria's entire body went rigid, her hand tightening around her beer bottle. Caleb could practically feel her preparing for corporate combat, could see her pulling on that armor she'd deliberately left behind. "Marcus," she said, voice cool and professional, "didn't realize you'd be here tonight." "It's my regular spot, Victoria. You know that." Marcus's eyes slid to Caleb, dismissive and contemptuous. "Though I see you've decided to expand your networking. Very democratic of you." I'm having a beer with a friend, Victoria said evenly. Is there something you needed? Friend? Marcus laughed, that same thoughtless, cruel sound from last week. Come on, Victoria, we both know how this looks. Powerful woman, blue-collar guy who can't even afford the good stuff. What is this, some kind of charity work, community outreach? Caleb felt Victoria starting to stand, saw her face shifting into the expression that probably made contractors and lawyers nervous. He put his hand on her arm, gentle but firm. I got this, he said quietly. She looked at him, surprise and protest warring in her expression, but something in his face made her settle back onto her stool. Caleb turned to Marcus with the same unhurried deliberateness he brought to diagnosing a complicated engine problem. Looked at him for a long moment, taking in the expensive suit, the watch that cost more than 6 months of Caleb's rent, the haircut that probably required a consultation. You know what's interesting about charity? Caleb finally said, voice calm and conversational. Real charity is quiet, happens when nobody's watching, doesn't need an audience or applause. Marcus blinked, uncertain where this was going. What's your point? My point is, everything you do is performance, every word calculated for effect, every gesture designed to prove something. Caleb took a sip of his beer. Must be exhausting, needing everyone to know how important you are every single minute. I don't need to prove anything. See, that right there. Caleb's voice stayed level, almost gentle. If you didn't need to prove anything, you wouldn't be standing here trying to embarrass me in front of Victoria. Wouldn't have spent last week making sure everyone heard you put me in my place. Marcus's face flushed. Listen, buddy, here's what I think, Caleb continued, still in that same calm tone. I think you saw us talking last week, saw me not caring about your opinion, and it bothered you more than you want to admit, because I'm not playing your game, which means you can't win it. This is ridiculous. Marcus looked to Victoria for support, found none. Victoria, you're really going to sit there and let this guy... Let him? Victoria's voice cut like glass. Marcus, I'm a grown woman having a conversation. I don't need your permission or your protection or your commentary. I'm just saying people are going to talk. You, sitting here with... Marcus gestured at Caleb vaguely. It doesn't look professional. Good, Victoria said flatly. I've been professional for 20 years. It's overrated. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You might want to think about who your friends are, Victoria, especially if you want Lang Development to keep working with Hale Properties. It was a threat, barely veiled, the kind of power play Victoria had probably seen 1,000 times in conference rooms and negotiation sessions. But Caleb saw something else in Marcus's posture, heard something in his voice that set off alarms honed through 18 years of diagnostic work. The same instinct that told him when a customer was hiding damage to avoid paying for repairs, when a parts supplier was marking up inferior materials, when something wasn't adding up. What project are you working on together? Caleb asked Victoria, voice casual. She looked at him, surprised by the question. The Riverside development, mixed commercial and residential. We're partnering on the financing and management structure. The one down by the old textile mill? You know it? Victoria's eyebrows raised. Drove past it every day for 3 years when I worked the morning shift. Caleb turned back to Marcus. That's the property with all the flood warning signs, right? The one the city kept trying to develop but couldn't get permits? Marcus's face went carefully neutral. The permit issues were resolved. Engineering studies showed the flood risk was overstated. Overstated. Caleb repeated the word thoughtfully. Interesting. Because I remember seeing that area underwater 4 times in the 3 years I drove past it. Spring runoff mostly, but one was just a heavy rain week in October. The new development includes improved drainage, Marcus said quickly, state-of-the-art water management systems. What kind of systems? Caleb asked. I'm not going to stand here and get technical specifications interrogated by a mechanic, Marcus snapped. The engineers signed off on everything. We've got all the permits. I'm sure you do. Caleb's voice stayed mild. Just seems like a lot of water to manage. That soil down there is mostly clay, right? Doesn't drain naturally. Would need serious infrastructure to keep buildings stable. Victoria had gone very still, her sharp mind clearly processing. Marcus, he's right about the clay. I remember that from the initial geological survey. What did the engineering report say about soil stability? It's fine. It's all handled. Marcus was backpedaling now, that confident smile starting to crack. Look, I don't have to justify our development choices to your partner? Victoria's voice had gone cold. The partner who's putting up 40% of the financing? That partner? Victoria, come on, this guy's in your head. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Actually, Caleb said quietly, I rebuilt the foundation on my apartment building 5 years ago. Volunteered my labor for reduced rent. Learned real quick that clay soil needs special engineering. Costs about 30% more than standard foundations. Easy place to cut corners if you're trying to maximize profit margin. The silence stretched. Marcus's face had gone from red to pale. Marcus, Victoria said, each word precise as a scalpel, please tell me you didn't cheap out on the foundation engineering. We met code. Everything's to code. Code is a minimum requirement, Caleb interjected. Minimum requirement in flood-prone clay soil is a recipe for structural failure in 5 to 10 years. Cracked foundations, water intrusion, eventual collapse if it's bad enough. Victoria stood up, her full height and presence suddenly filling the space. Marcus, my office. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Bring every engineering report, every contractor quote, every permit application, everything. You're overreacting. Am I? Her voice could have frozen bourbon. Because if you've cut corners on soil prep and foundation work to save money on a project where I'm liable for 40% of any structural failures, that's not overreacting. That's due diligence I should have done 3 months ago. This is because of him. Marcus pointed at Caleb, anger replacing his smooth performance. One conversation with a grease monkey and you're questioning months of professional engineering. Don't, Victoria's voice went arctic. Don't you dare dismiss legitimate safety concerns because you're embarrassed. And don't you ever refer to someone I'm talking to with that kind of contempt again. Marcus looked between them, calculation visible on his face. He was smart enough to recognize when he'd lost the room, but too proud to concede gracefully. Fine, he said. Monday, 8 a.m. You'll see I'm right, and you'll owe me an apology. He looked at Caleb with pure venom. Both of you. He walked away, back to his table where his usual crowd was pretending not to have heard everything. Victoria slowly sat back down, her hands trembling slightly with adrenaline. Did I just blow up a $15 million partnership because of a conversation at a bar? Maybe, Caleb said honestly. Or maybe you just saved yourself from a lawsuit that would have cost a lot more than $15 million. She looked at him, really looked at him. How did you know? About the foundation issues? I didn't know, I suspected. He rotated his beer bottle, thinking. Marcus got defensive too quick when I asked about the flood history. People who've done their homework don't get defensive about basic questions. They welcome them because it's a chance to show their preparation. Victoria shook her head slowly. That's exactly right. That's negotiation strategy 101. I should have caught it myself. You were on his team. Harder to see problems when you're supposed to be working together. We're not a team anymore, Victoria said grimly. Not if even half of what you're suggesting is true. They sat in silence for a moment. The bar continued around them, music playing, people laughing, Tommy making drinks. But their small pocket of space felt separate, charged with the electricity of something important having just shifted. Thank you, Victoria said finally, for caring enough to ask questions. Wasn't really about caring, Caleb admitted. Was about him using your partnership as a weapon against you. Made me think he needed that partnership more than you did. And when people need things badly, they sometimes take shortcuts. Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. God, I've been doing this for 20 years. How did I miss this? You didn't miss it. You just didn't have reason to look yet. Caleb met her eyes. You will on Monday. And my guess is you'll find exactly what you're looking for. And if I don't? If the engineering is solid and I just nuked a partnership over bar conversation, then you apologize and rebuild the relationship. But at least you'll know for sure. He paused. Though I don't think that's what you're going to find. Victoria studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away, but he held her gaze. You're not what you seem, she said finally. I'm exactly what I seem. Mechanic, single dad, guy who drinks cheap beer because it's what he can afford. No. She shook her head. You're someone who sees things other people miss, who asks questions everyone else is afraid to ask, who doesn't need credit or recognition but steps in anyway when it matters. Caleb felt uncomfortable under the assessment, the praise. I just said what I noticed, which is more than most people ever do. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. It's my CFO. Probably heard through the grapevine that I just went nuclear on Marcus. She looked at Caleb apologetically. I should take this. Damage control before rumors get worse than reality. Go, Caleb said. I understand. She stood, hesitated. Same time next week? If you still want to hang out with the guy who might have cost you $15 million. Victoria smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, warm and genuine. Especially because of that. She touched his shoulder briefly, a connection that felt electric even through his flannel shirt. Thank you, Caleb. Really. She walked toward the door, already answering her phone, already shifting into CEO mode. Caleb watched her go, feeling the absence of her presence like a physical thing. Tommy appeared with another beer, set it down without being asked. This one's on me, he said. Anyone who can make Marcus Lang look that shaken deserves a free drink. I wasn't trying to shake him. I know, that's what made it great. Tommy leaned on the bar conspiratorially. You know he's been coming in here bragging about that Riverside development for 6 months? Acting like he invented mixed-use properties. If he really did cut corners on foundation work, he whistled low. That's career-ending stuff. Maybe he didn't, Caleb said, even though he was almost certain Marcus had. Maybe the engineering is fine. Maybe. Tommy didn't sound convinced. But I've been bartending for 12 years. You learn to read people. And Marcus? He's all performance. Guys like that, when they get caught, it's usually because they believe their own hype. Caleb drank his free beer slowly, thinking about performance and authenticity, about the weight of responsibility and the cost of cutting corners, about how easy it was to make decisions that seemed smart in the moment but carried consequences you couldn't see until they crushed you. He thought about Victoria, about the way she'd stood up for him against Marcus, about the electricity he'd felt when she touched his shoulder, about the danger of letting himself feel things for a woman so far outside his world that they might as well be from different planets. And he thought about Emma, asleep in their apartment, safe and innocent, and trusting that her father would always make the right choices, would always protect her, would never let his own loneliness lead him somewhere dangerous. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Can't sleep, having weird dreams. When are you home? Caleb checked the time. 9:15. He'd told her 10, but she needed him now. He left cash on the bar, this time including a tip for Tommy because the free beer meant he could afford it, and headed into the night. The walk home felt different. The streets looked the same, the closed shops and the late-night convenience store and Emma's bus stop on the corner. But something inside him had shifted. He'd spent 3 months coming to Sullivan's to escape silence, to be somewhere else, to survive his grief in a space that didn't hold memories of Sarah. Now he was walking home thinking about Victoria Hale, about the way she'd looked at him like he mattered, about the conversation they'd had, real and unguarded, two lonely people finding unexpected connection, about the possibility of Thursday nights becoming something more than just survival, and about how terrifying that possibility felt. Because caring about someone meant risk, meant vulnerability, meant opening himself up to loss again, and he'd barely survived losing Sarah. Emma had barely survived it. Was he really ready to let someone else in? The question followed him up 3 flights of stairs, past the broken elevator, into his apartment that smelled like Emma's favorite strawberry shampoo from her evening shower. Her door was open wider than he'd left it. She was sitting up in bed, her reading light on, a book in her lap. At 12, Emma looked more like Sarah every day. Same dark hair, same serious brown eyes, same expression of concentrated determination when facing problems. Hey, sweetheart, Caleb said softly from the doorway. Thought you were asleep. Tried. Couldn't. She marked her place in the book, some fantasy novel about dragons and friendship that she'd read 3 times already. Had a dream that you didn't come home. Caleb's heart clenched. These dreams had started 6 months after Sarah died and still came back sometimes, anxiety manifesting in sleep. I'm always coming home, Em. Always. I know, logically I know. She hugged her knees to her chest. But dreams aren't logical. He came in, sat on the edge of her bed like he'd done 1,000 times. Want to talk about it? Not really, just wanted to see you. She studied his face with Sarah's too perceptive eyes. You look different tonight. Different how? I don't know. Less tired, maybe? Or tired in a different way? She tilted her head. Did something happen at the bar? Caleb thought about lying, about protecting her from complications. But Emma had lived through her mother's death, had grown up faster than any 12-year-old should have to. She deserved honesty. I met someone, he said carefully. A woman. We've been talking the last couple weeks. Emma's eyes widened slightly. Like dating talking. Or just talking. Just talking. He struggled for words. Very different from me. Successful. Has this whole other life. But we've had some good conversations. Do you like her? The question was simple, direct, painfully honest in the way only children could be. Yeah, Caleb admitted. I think I do, which is scary. Because of Mom? Because of a lot of things. Because she's from a different world. Because I don't want to mess up what we have, you and me. He touched Emma's hand. You're my priority. Always. Nothing changes that. Emma squeezed his fingers. Dad, I'm 12, not stupid. I know you're lonely. I know you gave up a lot to take care of me after Mom died. I didn't give up anything I wanted. You gave up dating, friends, going out, having a life. She said it matter-of-factly, without accusation. You think I don't notice? You go to that bar once a week for like 2 hours and that's it. That's your entire social life. Emma, I'm just saying, if you met someone who makes you less tired, that's probably good, even if it's scary. She smiled, and it was Sarah's smile, warm and understanding. Mom would want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. Caleb felt his throat tighten. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I learned to make my own breakfast and forge your signature on permission slips. She said it teasingly, but they both knew it was true. I'm tougher than you think, Dad. You can have a life. I'll be okay. He pulled her into a hug, this fierce, brilliant girl who'd survived too much and somehow remained kind. I love you, Em. More than anything in this world. I know, that's never been the question. She pulled back, looked at him seriously. The question is whether you're going to let yourself be happy. Because you deserve it, even if you don't think you do. Later, after Emma had finally fallen asleep for real, after Caleb had checked the locks and set his alarm and gotten ready for another Friday at the shop, he lay in bed thinking about his daughter's words. She was right. He'd been surviving, not living, going through motions, fulfilling responsibilities, being the father Emma needed but not the person he'd been before grief had hollowed him out. And Victoria, sharp, successful, lonely Victoria, who drank cheap beer she hated just to sit next to him, represented something he'd thought was over for him. The possibility of connection, of being seen, of mattering to someone in a way that wasn't about duty or responsibility, but about choice. It was terrifying. It was also maybe worth the risk. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Hi, it's Victoria. Tommy gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thank you again for tonight. I think you might have saved my company from a very expensive mistake. Also, I had a really good time talking to you. See you next Thursday? V? Caleb stared at the message for a long moment, feeling his heart rate pick up like he was a teenager getting his first crush text instead of a 42-year-old widower with a kid and a mortgage's worth of responsibility. He typed back, Tommy's a gossip, but I'll forgive him this time. Glad I could help. I had a good time too. Next Thursday sounds good. See. He hit send before he could overthink it, then immediately started overthinking it anyway. Was that too casual? Too formal? Should he have added something else? Her response came 30 seconds later. Perfect. Sleep well, Caleb. He smiled in the darkness of his bedroom, feeling something unfamiliar and fragile building in his chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility, or just the recognition that survival wasn't the same as living, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to remember the difference. Outside his window, the city continued its endless motion. Traffic sounds and distant sirens, and the ambient hum of millions of lives intersecting and separating. Somewhere out there, Victoria Hale was probably still on the phone with her CFO, managing fallout, making plans, being the powerful executive who'd built an empire from nothing. But she'd also taken time to text him, to say thank you, to make sure he knew Thursday mattered. Caleb fell asleep thinking about that, about the unexpected ways life could shift when you weren't looking for it, about how the weight of responsibility could feel lighter when someone else saw it and acknowledged its worth instead of dismissing it, about how maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want something for himself, even if it scared him. Especially because it scared him. Because anything worth having was worth being afraid of losing. He'd learned that with Sarah, with Emma, with everything that mattered. And maybe Victoria Hale, with her designer clothes and her lonely penthouse and her willingness to drink terrible beer just to sit next to him, maybe she was starting to matter too. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath he'd taken in 3 years, like coming up for air, like maybe, finally, learning to swim again instead of just treading water. And in the morning, when Emma came out for breakfast and saw him smiling at his phone, she didn't say anything, just smiled her mother's smile and poured her cereal. Knowing, the way kids always seem to know, that something had changed, that her father was finally, carefully, starting to let himself hope again, and that maybe this time hope wouldn't break him. Maybe this time it would build something new. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that matched Victoria's mood perfectly. She'd spent the entire weekend buried in files, cross-referencing engineering reports against permit applications, comparing contractor quotes against industry standards, and the deeper she dug, the worse it looked. Marcus Lang hadn't just cut corners, he'd practically eliminated them. She sat now in her corner office on the 14th floor of a building she'd purchased and renovated 5 years ago, surrounded by evidence of negligence so systematic it had to be intentional. Her CFO, Robert Chen, sat across from her, his usually unflappable demeanor showing cracks. "It's bad, Victoria," Robert said quietly, tapping the geological survey report. "The soil analysis clearly recommends deep pier foundations with waterproofing to prevent heave. But the contractor quotes Marcus approved are for standard slab foundations with minimal drainage. How much would he save with that approach? Roughly $800,000 on foundation work alone. Robert pulled up a spreadsheet on his tablet. But the long-term liability, if those buildings start showing structural issues in 5 years, we're looking at tens of millions in remediation costs, plus lawsuits from residents, commercial tenants, anyone affected. Victoria felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but it was cold anger now, focused. She'd spent 20 years learning to weaponize fury into strategy. And we're liable for 40% of that because of our partnership agreement. Correct. Unless we can prove Marcus deliberately misrepresented the engineering specifications, which would void the partnership and put all liability on Lang Development. Which is exactly what we're going to do. Victoria glanced at the clock. 7:55. He'll be here in 5 minutes. I want you in the room. Take notes. Record if he consents. This needs to be documented. Robert nodded, his expression grim. You know he's going to fight this. Marcus doesn't admit mistakes. He doesn't have to admit anything. The evidence speaks for itself. She stood, smoothing her charcoal suit, checking her reflection in the window. She looked every inch the CEO, polished, professional, untouchable. Good. Marcus responded to power, and today she needed every advantage. At exactly 8 a.m., her assistant Sarah knocked and opened the door. Mr. Lang is here. Send him in. Marcus entered with his usual confidence, wearing a suit that probably cost $4,000, carrying a leather portfolio that screamed expensive taste. But Victoria saw what she hadn't noticed before. The way his eyes darted around the room, cataloging threats. The slight tension in his shoulders. The performance of ease rather than actual comfort. Caleb had been right. When people got defensive too quickly, it was because they were hiding something. Victoria, Marcus said with his trademark smile. Robert, wasn't expecting the full executive treatment this morning. Sit down, Marcus. Victoria's voice could have frozen steel. The smile flickered. He sat, placing his portfolio on the conference table with deliberate precision. I brought all the documentation you requested. Engineering reports, permits, contractor quotes. Everything's in order. Is it? Victoria opened her own folder, pulled out the geological survey. Because I spent the weekend comparing what you showed me 3 months ago against what you actually filed with the city, and there are some interesting discrepancies. Marcus's face remained neutral, but his hands tightened on the arms of his chair. Discrepancies? The geological survey you showed me recommended deep pier foundations with comprehensive waterproofing due to clay soil composition and flood history. She slid the document across the table. But the contractor quotes you approved are for standard slab foundations. Care to explain? The engineers revised their recommendations after additional soil testing. His voice was smooth, practiced. The initial survey was overly cautious. Subsequent analysis showed standard foundations would be adequate. Show me that subsequent analysis. Marcus opened his portfolio, shuffled through papers. I have it here somewhere. You don't, Victoria interrupted, because it doesn't exist. I called the engineering firm this morning. They stand by their original recommendations. They never issued a revision. The silence that followed was profound. Robert's pen scratched against his notepad, the only sound in the room. Marcus's face had gone carefully blank. There must be some miscommunication. Let me contact the engineers directly and clarify. I also pulled the permit applications filed with the city, Victoria continued relentlessly. The ones submitted under both our companies' names, making us jointly liable for accuracy. Those applications list standard slab foundations, but the engineering approval attached to those permits specifically requires deep pier foundations. That's a clerical error. Marcus, Victoria's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what deliberate misrepresentation looks like. You took engineering recommendations that required expensive foundation work, approved cheaper alternatives that don't meet safety standards, and filed permits with documentation you knew was contradictory. All to save $800,000 and boost your profit margin. Marcus stood abruptly, color flooding his face. You're accusing me of fraud based on what? A conversation with some mechanic at a bar? I'm accusing you based on evidence. The mechanic just made me look at what I should have examined 3 months ago. Victoria remained seated, forcing Marcus to stand alone, isolated. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to the engineering firm's original specifications. Deep pier foundations, full waterproofing, proper drainage systems. You're going to eat the cost difference. And you're going to do it without using any of Hale Properties' financing. That's insane. The project's already underwater financially if we... Marcus caught himself, but too late. If you meet actual safety standards, Victoria's smile was arctic. Then maybe you shouldn't have proposed a project you couldn't afford to build correctly. Victoria, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable would be dissolving our partnership entirely and reporting you to the licensing board for filing false permit applications. Generous is giving you a chance to fix this quietly. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. You can't dissolve the partnership. We have a contract. We have a contract based on your representation that all engineering specifications would be met. You violated those terms. Robert? Robert looked up from his notes. The partnership agreement includes a clause allowing either party to withdraw if the other engages in activities that create unreasonable legal or financial liability. Filing permits with false engineering documentation qualifies. We're within our rights to withdraw and pursue recovery of our investment to date. Plus damages, Victoria added, for the time and resources we've invested based on your misrepresentations. Marcus looked between them, calculation replacing bluster. He was smart enough to know when he'd lost. What do you want? I told you, rebuild the project to actual engineering specifications, or don't build it at all and return our investment plus 20% for breach of contract. Victoria stood now, meeting him eye to eye. Those are your options. Choose quickly. And if I don't choose either, then I file a formal complaint with the city, the licensing board, and every investor in Lang Development. I make sure everyone knows you filed fraudulent permit applications and tried to build on unstable ground to save money. Her voice went deadly quiet. Your choice, Marcus. Fix it or lose everything. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Marcus's face cycled through emotions: fury, fear, calculation, resignation. I'll need time, he finally said, to secure additional financing, to revise the project plans. You have 30 days. After that, I file. That's not enough time. Then work faster, or give us our money back and walk away. Victoria crossed her arms. Either way, Hale Properties is done partnering with Lang Development. This meeting is over. Marcus grabbed his portfolio, his movements sharp with barely controlled rage. You're making a mistake, Victoria. You're letting some nobody with grease under his fingernails destroy a perfectly good business relationship. No, Victoria said calmly. You made the mistake when you thought I wouldn't notice you putting lives at risk to pad your profit margin. Caleb just helped me see what was already there. Marcus's jaw worked, but he had nothing left to say. He stormed out, nearly knocking over Sarah in the hallway. The door clicked shut. Robert let out a long breath. Well, that went about as well as could be expected. He's going to fight, Victoria said, already running scenarios. He'll try to rally our mutual contacts, paint me as irrational, try to isolate me professionally. Let him try. Robert's smile was sharp. We have documentation. He has excuses. This is a fight he can't win. Victoria nodded, but she felt the weight settling on her shoulders. The weight of having made an enemy, of potential lawsuits and professional fallout and the exhausting battle ahead. It was the right call. She knew that with absolute certainty. But right calls still carried costs. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. How did it go? She stared at the message, feeling something shift in her chest. He'd been thinking about her. Worrying, maybe. Caring enough to check in. She typed back. You were right. About everything. Partnership dissolved. Long story. Can I call you later? His response came quickly. I'm at work, but lunch is 12:30. Call then if you want. Victoria checked her calendar. Back-to-back meetings until 2 p.m. She cleared the 12:30 slot without hesitation. Will do. And Caleb, thank you. You probably saved my company. Just ask questions. You did the hard part. She smiled at her phone, feeling some of the weight lift. Robert was watching her with poorly concealed curiosity. The mechanic? He asked. His name is Caleb. Victoria's voice carried a warning not to dismiss him. And he saw in 5 minutes what we missed in 3 months of due diligence. I'm not criticizing. I'm impressed. Robert gathered his notes. I'm also wondering if this is just about business or if there's something else going on. Victoria considered deflecting, maintaining professional boundaries, keeping her personal life separate. Then she remembered sitting in Sullivan's drinking terrible beer, remembered the way Caleb looked at her like she was worth seeing, remembered Emma's wisdom about letting herself be happy. Something else, she admitted. Maybe. It's new and complicated. The best things usually are. Robert headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, anyone who can make you smile at your phone in the middle of a corporate crisis is probably worth the complication. After he left, Victoria spent the rest of the morning managing fallout. Calls to investors, emails to contractors, damage control with the city planning office. By noon, she'd shored up most of the immediate concerns, but she could feel the tension headache building behind her eyes. At 12:30 exactly, she closed her office door, pulled up Caleb's number, and called. He answered on the second ring. Hey. Just that one word, warm and solid, made her shoulders relax. Hey yourself, is this a good time? Yeah, I'm in the break room. Everyone else went out for lunch. She heard the scrape of a chair, imagined him settling in. So, tell me what happened. Victoria walked him through the morning's confrontation, the evidence she'd found, Marcus's denials, and eventual capitulation. Caleb listened without interrupting, making small sounds of acknowledgement that told her he was tracking every detail. You did the right thing, he said when she finished. I know it doesn't feel great right now, but you protected a lot of people from getting hurt. I also made a powerful enemy. Marcus has connections all over the city. So do you. Difference is, you have integrity backing yours up. He's got fraud. Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. That matters when things get ugly. You sound very certain. I've seen this play out. Not at your level, but same dynamics. Guy I worked with years ago was selling customers unnecessary repairs, pocketing the difference. Got caught, tried to rally the other mechanics against the whistleblower. Didn't work. Because when people know you're willing to cheat, they start wondering when you'll cheat them. Victoria absorbed this, finding comfort in his experience. How long did the fallout last? Couple months of tension, then the guy left, started his own shop, went bankrupt within a year because customers didn't trust him. Caleb paused. Marcus will land somewhere. Guys like him always do. But his reputation's damaged. That's his consequence. I hope you're right. I'm usually right about people. Not much else, but people I can read. She heard warmth in his voice. How are you holding up? Exhausted? Angry? Relieved? Victoria leaned back in her chair looking out at the city. Grateful. You stopped me from making a $15 million mistake. You would have caught it eventually. Maybe. Or maybe I would have been so invested I couldn't see clearly anymore. She twisted the phone cord around her finger, a nervous habit from decades ago. Can I ask you something? Why did you care? You didn't know me, didn't have any stake in my business. Why speak up? Caleb was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Because I spent 18 years watching people cut corners that put other people at risk. Mechanics who don't fix brakes properly because it's faster. Contractors who use cheap materials because customers won't know the difference until it fails. People who prioritize profit over safety and sleep fine at night. That bothers you? Yeah, it bothers me. Because when corners get cut, real people get hurt. Families. Kids. His voice tightened slightly. Sarah, my wife. She died because a doctor dismissed her symptoms for 6 months. Said she was being dramatic, anxious. By the time they actually ran the tests, the cancer had spread too far. Victoria's chest constricted. Caleb, I'm so sorry. Point is, when I see someone cutting corners, I think about all the people who'll pay the price later. So yeah, I spoke up, because maybe those families who would have bought condos in Marcus's development deserve better than cracked foundations and flooded basements. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding. Victoria felt something crystallize in her chest, something that went beyond attraction or interest into deeper territory. This man, this quiet mechanic who everyone dismissed, carried a moral compass so strong it guided everything he did. Not performatively, not for credit, just because it was right. You're a good man, Caleb Reed, she said softly. I'm just a guy who's seen what happens when people don't speak up. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with praise. Anyway, you called me, which means you're probably avoiding doing something else. She laughed, surprised by his perception. I have a board meeting at 2 that I'm dreading. They're going to ask about Marcus. Tell them the truth. You discovered potential fraud. You acted appropriately. You protected the company's interests. He made it sound simple. That's what boards want to hear. You'd be good at this, the business side. Nah, too much talking, not enough fixing things. She heard a timer go off in the background. That's my lunch break. Need to get back. Caleb? Victoria said quickly before he could hang up. Thursday. Same time? Wouldn't miss it. She could hear the smile in his voice. And Victoria? You're going to be fine. You're tougher than Marcus, smarter than him, and you've got truth on your side. He doesn't stand a chance. After they disconnected, Victoria sat for a long moment, feeling steadier than she had all morning, feeling seen and supported in a way that had nothing to do with professional networking and everything to do with genuine human connection. Her 2 p.m. board meeting was exactly as difficult as she'd anticipated. 5 board members, all successful in their own right, all protective of the company they'd helped build. Victoria presented the Marcus situation clearly and comprehensively, walking through the evidence without emotion. They asked hard questions. She gave harder answers. By 3 p.m., they'd voted unanimously to support her decision and authorize legal action if Marcus didn't comply within 30 days. As the board members filed out, her chairman, Gerald Morrison, 72 and still sharp as broken glass, lingered. That was well handled, Victoria, he said. Difficult situation. You managed it properly. Thank you. Though I'm curious. Gerald's eyes, faded blue but missing nothing, studied her. What made you look so closely at the foundation specifications? That's pretty granular detail for a CEO to catch. Victoria met his gaze steadily. I got a tip from someone with construction experience. It made me question assumptions I shouldn't have made. Does someone have a name? Does it matter? Gerald's smile was slight but genuine. I suppose not. Just glad you listened. A lot of executives wouldn't. Pride gets in the way. He gathered his papers. Keep listening to people who see what you miss, Victoria. That's how you build something that lasts. After he left, Victoria stood at her window watching the city move below. 14 floors up, the people looked like ants, purposeful and tiny. Somewhere down there, Caleb was probably elbow deep in an engine, covered in grease, doing honest work that mattered. She'd spent 20 years building height, accumulating power and success, and all the markers of achievement. But what had she actually built? An empire of glass and steel that felt empty when she came home to it. Professional victories that rang hollow when celebrated alone. Meanwhile, Caleb, who lived in an apartment with a broken elevator and wore flannel shirts until they frayed, had built something real. A daughter who loved him. Integrity that couldn't be bought or sold. A life with meaning even when it was hard. Victoria's phone rang. Marcus Lang, calling from his own office across town, ready to negotiate or threaten or whatever strategy he'd settled on. She answered. Marcus, I've consulted with my legal team. His voice was cold, professional. They advise me that your interpretation of our partnership agreement is questionable at best. Then I'll see you in court. Victoria, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You committed fraud. I'm giving you a chance to fix it quietly. That's generous. She kept her voice level, emotionless. You have 29 days left. Use them wisely. She hung up before he could respond, feeling a surge of fierce satisfaction. For 20 years she'd played nice, compromised, found middle ground with people who didn't deserve it. For 20 years she'd prioritized business relationships over doing what was right. Not anymore. Caleb had asked her why she'd missed the foundation issues. The real answer was that she'd been so focused on the deal, on the partnership, on maintaining professional relationships, that she'd stopped asking hard questions. She'd forgotten that success built on lies was just failure waiting to collapse. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings and strategy sessions and carefully worded press releases. Word had gotten out about the Lang development split, impossible to keep quiet in an industry that thrived on gossip. And Victoria spent hours managing perceptions, reassuring investors, positioning the dissolution as a strategic decision rather than a crisis. By Wednesday night, she was exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical. She was emotionally drained, professionally isolated, and questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. She almost canceled Thursday with Caleb, almost texted him some excuse about work, about needing space, about the complication being too much when everything else was falling apart. But then she remembered what Emma had said, filtered through Caleb's retelling. The question is whether you're going to let yourself be happy. And she thought about the fact that Caleb had called her during his lunch break just to check how she was doing, had offered support without expecting anything in return, had been a steady presence in the chaos. She didn't cancel. Thursday evening, Victoria walked into Sullivan's at 7:30 and found Caleb already at his usual stool, already watching for her. His face lit up when he saw her, a genuine smile that made the whole exhausting week feel manageable. She sat down next to him without pretense, without performance, just herself. Tommy brought her the terrible $4 beer without being asked. She drank it without grimacing. Rough week, Caleb asked. Apocalyptic week. Victoria set the bottle down. But I survived. More than survived. You won. He touched his bottle to hers gently. Robert called me yesterday. Victoria's eyes widened. My CFO called you? Wanted to say thank you. Said the foundation issue would have cost the company millions if it hadn't been caught. Caleb looked embarrassed. Also offered me a job as a consultant. What did you say? I said I'm a mechanic, not a consultant. He smiled slightly. But I appreciated the offer. You should consider it. You're good at seeing what other people miss. I'm good at cars, Victoria. That's my skill set. Everything else is just common sense. He turned to face her fully. How are you, really? The question, asked with such genuine concern, nearly broke her. Victoria felt her throat tighten, felt the week's stress and fear and exhaustion pressing against her carefully maintained composure. I'm terrified, she admitted. Marcus is going to fight this. I've probably damaged relationships with half the developers in the city. My board is supportive now, but if this drags on, if it costs us business, she trailed off. Then you'll handle it, Caleb said with absolute certainty, because you're not wrong, and people who do the right thing for the right reasons, they find a way through. You have a lot of faith in karma. Not karma, character. He met her eyes steadily. You showed yours this week. That matters more than Marcus's connections. Victoria wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that integrity would win over influence, that doing right would be rewarded instead of punished. But she'd spent 20 years in a world where success often came to those willing to compromise principles. I hope you're right, she said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the bar dynamics play out around them. Marcus's usual table was conspicuously empty. He'd apparently found a new spot to perform for admirers. The absence felt like victory and loss simultaneously. Tell me about Emma, Victoria said, needing to think about something other than corporate warfare. How's seventh grade treating her? Caleb's whole face softened, the way it always did when he talked about his daughter. She's doing good. Straight A's, which she's very proud of. Made the volleyball team, which terrifies me because I have to watch 12-year-olds spike balls at each other's heads. He smiled. But she loves it. Comes home sweaty and happy and talks for an hour about rotations and serves. She sounds remarkable. She is. Tougher than me, smarter than me, better than I deserve. He pulled out his phone, showed Victoria a picture. Emma, in a volleyball uniform, dark hair pulled back, Sarah's serious eyes looking at the camera with determined joy. She's beautiful. She has your eyes. She has her mother's everything. The good parts, anyway. Caleb put the phone away carefully. I just try not to screw it up too badly. I think you're doing better than you know. I hope so. He was quiet for a moment. She asked about you. Victoria's heart jumped. What did you tell her? That I met someone I liked talking to. That it was new and complicated and probably scary. He looked at her directly. That I wasn't sure where it was going, but I wanted to find out. The honesty of it, the vulnerability, made Victoria's chest ache. And what did she say? She said I deserved to be happy. That I should let myself try. Caleb's smile was self-deprecating. 12 years old and wiser than I'll ever be. I'd like to meet her someday. If this becomes something where that would make sense. Caleb studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Yeah, he said finally. I think I'd like that too. They stayed until 9:30, talking about everything and nothing. About the small victories that got them through hard days. About the weight of responsibility and the fear of failing people who depended on you. About the unexpected ways life could shift when you least expected it. When Caleb stood to leave, checking his phone to make sure he'd be home before 10, Victoria stood too. Walk out with you? She asked. They left Sullivan's together, stepping out into the cool evening air. The street was busy with Thursday night activity. Couples heading to dinner, groups of friends bar hopping, the endless motion of a city that never quite stopped. They stood on the sidewalk, suddenly awkward, the easy intimacy of the bar replaced by the vulnerability of goodbye. Thank you, Victoria said. For this week. For caring enough to ask questions. For checking on me. For just being you. I didn't do anything special. You did, though. You reminded me what integrity looks like. What matters. She stepped closer, close enough to smell motor oil and detergent and something essentially him. You reminded me who I wanted to be before I got so caught up in winning that I forgot why I started. Caleb looked at her with those still, seeing eyes. You're giving me too much credit. No, I'm giving you exactly the credit you deserve. She reached up, touched his face gently, felt the roughness of 5 o'clock shadow under her palm. Can I kiss you? His breath caught. For a moment she thought he might say no, might pull back, might decide the complication wasn't worth it. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't dramatic or passionate or anything like the movie moments Victoria had seen 1,000 times. It was careful and sweet and terrifyingly real. It tasted like cheap beer and possibility. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. When they pulled apart, Caleb's eyes were wide. his breathing unsteady. Wow, he said softly. Yeah, Victoria agreed. Wow. They stood there for another moment, the city moving around them, both of them aware that something significant had just shifted. I should go, Caleb finally said. Emma's probably watching the clock. I know, go. Victoria stepped back, giving him space. Same time next week? Yeah, definitely. He started walking backward, not quite ready to look away. Be careful this week. Marcus is going to escalate. I can handle Marcus. I know you can. His smile was warm and proud and made her feel 10 feet tall. But be careful anyway. She watched him walk away until he turned the corner toward his apartment, then stood there for another few minutes, touching her lips, feeling the echo of that kiss. When she finally turned toward where her car was parked 3 blocks away, she felt lighter than she had in years. The week ahead would be hard. Marcus would fight. There would be complications and consequences and probably more sleepless nights than she wanted to count. But for the first time in 20 years, Victoria Hale felt like she was fighting for the right reasons. Not for empire or success or professional victory, for integrity, for truth. For the people who would live in those buildings Marcus wanted to cut corners on. And maybe, just maybe, for the chance to build something real with a man who saw her for who she actually was instead of what she could do for him. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. The kiss changed everything and nothing at all. Caleb still went to work at Morrison's Auto every morning at 6:30, still came home smelling like motor oil and honest labor, still made Emma dinner and checked her homework and tucked her in at 8:30. His routine didn't shift, his life didn't transform into something unrecognizable, but he thought about Victoria constantly, the way she'd looked at him on that sidewalk, vulnerable and certain at the same time, the softness of her lips against his, that careful gentleness like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. The fact that she'd asked permission before kissing him, like his consent mattered as much as hers. He'd spent 3 years believing that part of him had died with Sarah, the part that could feel attraction, desire, the terrifying hope of connection. And now here was Victoria Hale, powerful and lonely and impossibly complicated, making him feel things he'd thought were finished. It scared him more than he wanted to admit. Dad, you're burning the pancakes, Emma said from the kitchen table, her voice amused rather than critical. Caleb jerked back to attention, flipping the pancakes quickly. They were definitely darker than ideal, crispy around the edges. Sorry, kiddo, mind wandered. To that woman you mentioned. Emma's tone was carefully casual, the way kids asked questions when they were actually very interested in the answer. Maybe. Caleb plated the pancakes, set them in front of her along with syrup. Is that okay? Emma poured syrup with the precision of a scientist conducting an experiment, creating perfect coverage. I already told you it's okay. I meant it. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. These are burnt. I know. But I'll eat them anyway because you tried. She grinned, and it was so much Sarah's grin that Caleb's chest tightened. Are you going to see her again? Thursday nights at the bar. That's our thing. Just at the bar? Emma's eyebrows raised. Dad, you can invite her here. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to fall apart if you date someone. I know you're not fragile. Caleb sat down across from her with his own plate of burnt pancakes. But this is new. We're figuring it out. I don't want to rush anything. You're scared, Emma observed, because apparently being 12 gave you supernatural powers of perception. Yeah, I'm scared. Terrified, actually. Because of Mom? Because of everything. Because Victoria's from a completely different world. Because what if I screw it up? What if she realizes I'm just a mechanic who can barely afford his rent and decides she deserves better? He hadn't meant to say all that out loud, but Emma had a way of pulling honesty out of him. Emma set down her fork, looked at him with those serious brown eyes. Dad, if she thinks she deserves better than you, then she's an idiot. And you said she was smart, so I don't think she's an idiot. She is smart. Brilliant, actually. Then trust her to know what she wants. Emma picked up her fork again. And trust yourself to be worth wanting. Caleb stared at his daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so wise, so sure of things he still questioned. When did you grow up? Probably around the time I learned to make my own breakfast because you had early shifts. She smiled to soften the words. I'm just saying, you're a good dad. You're a good person. You deserve to be happy. Stop punishing yourself for mom dying. The words hit like a physical blow. I'm not. You are, though. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. You think if you just work hard enough, sacrifice enough, stay sad enough, somehow that makes it okay that she's gone. But Dad, she's gone anyway. Being miserable doesn't bring her back. It just makes both of us sad. Caleb felt his throat close up, felt tears threatening. I'm not trying to be miserable. I know, you're trying to be good enough, but you already are. Emma reached across the table, took his hand. Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she died. Made me promise to make sure you didn't just stop living. She said that? Yeah, she was really worried about you, about how you'd be okay. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She made me promise to kick your butt if you turned into a sad hermit. So I'm keeping that promise. Consider your butt kicked. Caleb laughed through the tears that were falling now, pulled Emma into a hug across the table. You're too smart for 12. I know, it's a burden. She hugged him back hard. So invite Victoria over. Let me meet her. Let yourself have something good. I will. When the time is right. The time is right when you stop being scared. Emma pulled back, wiped her eyes. Now I need to finish these burnt pancakes and get to school. We have a math test and I actually studied this time. After Emma left for school, Caleb sat in the quiet apartment thinking about his daughter's words, about Sarah's final wishes, about the way he'd been surviving instead of living, going through motions instead of actually engaging with the world, about Victoria, who'd asked if she could kiss him like his answer mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Marcus is threatening legal action. My lawyer says he doesn't have a case, but it's going to get ugly. How do you deal with people who can't admit when they're wrong? Caleb typed back. Usually I let them scream themselves out and then show them the broken part they insisted wasn't broken. Hard to argue with physical evidence. Unfortunately, corporate fraud doesn't leave physical evidence as obvious as a broken transmission. Sure it does. You've got the geological surveys, the permit applications, the contractor quotes. That's your broken transmission. When he tries to argue, just point to the parts that don't match. There was a pause, then, you're right, I keep thinking I need to out-argue him, but I just need to show the receipts. Exactly. Let the evidence do the talking. Thank you for perspective, for keeping me sane, for existing. Another pause. I miss you. Caleb stared at those 3 words, feeling something warm and terrifying expand in his chest. I miss you too. 3 more days until Thursday. Counting them. Be safe today. He went to work feeling lighter, despite the difficult conversation with Emma, despite the burnt pancakes, despite everything. Because somewhere in this city, Victoria Hale was missing him, was counting days until she saw him again, was treating him like he mattered. The day at Morrison's Auto was predictably chaotic. A transmission rebuild that should have been routine turned complicated when Caleb discovered the customer had been driving with a known leak for 6 months, causing cascade damage. A brake job revealed rotors ground down to dangerous levels. An oil change uncovered evidence of someone having used the wrong oil weight for probably years. Each discovery meant difficult conversations with customers who didn't want to hear that their neglect had consequences, who wanted quick fixes instead of proper repairs, who argued about costs because they couldn't afford to pay for their own mistakes. By lunch, Caleb was exhausted and covered in grease despite his best efforts. He was eating a sandwich in the break room when his boss, Tom Morrison, walked in. Tom was 63, third-generation owner of Morrison's Auto, and one of the few people in the world Caleb genuinely respected. He'd given Caleb a job 18 years ago when he was just a kid who was good with his hands, had kept him employed through Sarah's illness and death, had never once made him feel like anything less than valued. Caleb, got a minute? Tom asked. Sure, boss. What's up? Tom sat down heavily, looking older than usual. Had a call this morning. Robert Chen from Hale Properties said you did them a favor, pointed out some problems with a development project. Caleb felt his stomach sink. Is that a problem? I didn't do it on company time or anything. Problem? No. Tom's weathered face cracked into a smile. Opposite of a problem. He wanted to know if I'd consider loaning you out as a consultant. Said they'd pay Morrison's Auto a consultation fee, which would let me pay you your regular rate plus a bonus for the extra work. I don't know anything about consulting. You know about foundations and soil stability and structural integrity? Apparently that's exactly what they need. Tom leaned back. Robert said you saw things in 5 minutes that their engineering team missed in months. Said you might have saved them millions in liability. I just asked questions. You always just ask questions. Then you find the problems everyone else missed. Tom studied him thoughtfully. You ever think about doing something besides turning wrenches? Not really. I like fixing things. This would be fixing things, just bigger things. Tom pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. Robert's offering 3 consulting sessions to start. You'd review development plans, look for red flags, basically do what you did with the Riverside project. Pay is $500 an hour. Caleb nearly choked on his sandwich. $500 an hour? That's what he said. 3 sessions, probably 3 hours each. That's $4,500 before taxes. Tom's smile widened. More than you make in a month here. Tom, I can't. This shop needs me. This shop needs you, but this shop will survive if you take some evening consulting work. Tom's voice was firm but kind. Caleb, you've been here 18 years. You're the best mechanic I've ever employed. But you're also underpaid because I can't afford to pay you what you're worth and keep the shop running. You pay me fine. I pay you adequately. There's a difference. Tom pushed the card closer. Take the consulting work. Make some extra money. Maybe finally fix that broken elevator in your building, or take Emma somewhere nice. You've earned it. Caleb picked up the card, Robert Chen's name embossed in professional silver letters. What if I'm not good at it? Then you'll be not good at it for $4,500, which is still better than being good at this for what I can pay you. Tom stood, clapped Caleb on the shoulder. Call Robert, at least hear what he has to say. Worst case, you say no and nothing changes. Best case, you give Emma opportunities you've been wanting to give her. After Tom left, Caleb sat staring at the business card, thinking about $500 an hour, about the things that kind of money could mean for Emma. New clothes that didn't come from the clearance rack, school field trips he didn't have to save up for, maybe even college savings that were currently non-existent. About the fact that he'd spent 18 years believing his worth was limited to what his hands could fix. And here was evidence that his mind, his experience, his ability to see problems might be worth something too. He called Robert during his afternoon break. Caleb, thanks for calling back, Robert said, sounding genuinely pleased. Victoria told me what you did. I wanted to offer you some consulting work if you're interested. Tom said $500 an hour. That's our standard rate for specialized consultants. Given that you potentially saved us 8 figures in liability, I'd say you're worth it. I'm a mechanic, Mr. Chen. I don't have degrees or credentials or... You have 18 years of practical experience and an eye for structural problems that our credentialed engineers missed. That's exactly what we need. Robert's tone was professional, but warm. Look, we're not asking you to design buildings. We're asking you to review plans and tell us if you see anything that raises red flags. Use your experience. Trust your instincts. That's it. What if my instincts are wrong? Then we get second opinions from engineers. But your instincts on the Riverside project were dead right, so I'm willing to bet they'll be right more often than not. Robert paused. Can I send you a contract? No obligation. Just look it over, think about it. Talk to Victoria about it. She speaks very highly of you. Caleb felt his face heat at that. She does? Constantly. Says you're the most perceptive person she's met in 20 years of business. Robert's voice carried a smile. Between you and me, I think you're more than just a professional interest to her. We're figuring that out. Good. She deserves someone who sees her as more than a CEO. Robert shifted back to business. I'll email the contract. Take your time. But I hope you'll consider it. We could use someone who asks the right questions. The contract arrived in Caleb's email 20 minutes later. It was surprisingly straightforward. 3 consulting sessions, 3 hours each, $500 per hour paid to Morrison's Auto, who would then pay Caleb his regular rate plus a $1,000 bonus per session. Review of development plans for structural concerns, soil stability, flood risk, and any other issues that might pose long-term liability. Caleb read it 3 times, looking for catches, for hidden obligations, for anything that seemed too good to be true. But it was exactly what Robert had described. Honest work for honest pay, just using different skills than he usually used. He signed it, scanned it, sent it back before he could overthink further. Then he texted Victoria. "Your CFO just hired me as a consultant. Did you know about this?" Her response came quickly. "It was his idea, but I approved it enthusiastically. You're going to say yes, right?" "I already did, feeling like I'm in over my head." "Welcome to my entire career. The secret is everyone feels that way. Some people are just better at hiding it." "What if I screw up?" "Then you'll screw up and we'll fix it together. But you won't screw up. You see things, Caleb. That's a gift." A pause, then, "I'm proud of you for taking a chance." Caleb stared at those words. "I'm proud of you," and felt something break open in his chest. When was the last time someone had said that to him? Sarah, probably. Years ago. Before she got sick. Before survival became the only goal. Before everything got reduced to just getting through each day. "Thank you," he typed back. "That means more than you know." "I know exactly how much it means. Because you saying the same to me last week meant everything." They texted back and forth for the rest of his break. Easy conversation about nothing important that somehow felt vital. Victoria told him about a building she was considering purchasing, asked his opinion on the photos she sent of the foundation. Caleb pointed out water staining that suggested drainage issues, recommended she get a comprehensive moisture analysis before making an offer. She sent back a string of emoji, surprised faces, and hearts and thumbs up that made him laugh out loud in the break room. When he got home that night, Emma was already cooking dinner. Spaghetti, her specialty. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and tomato sauce. "You're cooking?" Caleb asked, surprised. "You've had a long week. Figured I'd help." She stirred the sauce with the confidence of someone who'd been cooking since she was 9. "Plus, I wanted to talk to you about something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not bad. Just..." Emma turned to face him, suddenly nervous. "My friend Jasmine's having a birthday party next weekend at that trampoline place downtown, and I was invited." "That's great, Em. You should go." "It costs $30 for the admission and the pizza party after." She said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "I know that's a lot. I have some birthday money saved. I can contribute." "Emma." Caleb's heart broke a little. "You shouldn't have to pay for your own birthday parties." "I know, but money's tight, and I don't want to make things harder." "I got a consulting job today with Victoria's company. It pays really well." He pulled her into a hug. "You can go to the party. You can buy Jasmine a present. You don't have to worry about money." Emma pulled back, eyes wide. "Really? A consulting job? Doing what?" "Looking at building plans, telling them if I see problems. Apparently I'm good at that." "Of course you are. You're good at everything." Emma's smile was brilliant. "Dad, that's amazing. Does this mean we can finally fix the elevator?" "Let's not get crazy, but yeah, things might be a little easier." He kissed her forehead. "Go to your party. Have fun. Be 12. That night, after Emma was asleep, Caleb sat on his small balcony looking out at the city. 3 floors up wasn't high enough for a real view, just other buildings and distant lights and the endless motion of urban life. But it felt different tonight, like he was seeing it from a new angle. He thought about the chain of events that had led here. Walking into Sullivan's 3 months ago, just looking for somewhere to be that wasn't his empty apartment. Noticing Victoria noticing him. Marcus's cruelty backfiring into connection. That conversation about the Riverside project that had somehow turned into a consulting contract. The way small moments accumulated into significant change when you weren't paying attention. His phone rang. Victoria, calling instead of texting. "Hey," he answered, smiling without meaning to. "Hey yourself, is this a good time?" "Perfect time." "Emma's asleep. I'm just sitting here thinking." "About what?" Her voice was soft, intimate in a way it never was during business hours. "About how weird life is. 3 months ago, I was just trying to survive each day. Now I've got a consulting contract. My daughter's going to birthday parties without worrying about money, and I'm talking to a woman who makes me feel things I thought were dead." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Is that good weird or bad weird?" "Terrifying weird, but probably good." He leaned back in his chair, looking at the stars barely visible through light pollution. Your CFO seems to think I know what I'm doing. Robert's a good judge of character. If he hired you, it's because he believes you'll deliver. She paused. I believe you'll deliver too. Even though I have no idea what I'm doing? Especially because of that. People who think they know everything stop asking questions. You ask all the right questions. Victoria's voice carried warmth that made his chest tight. That's what we need. Fresh eyes. Someone who isn't so deep in industry standards that they forget to question whether those standards actually make sense. I'm just a mechanic who knows about foundations. You're a mechanic who understands that cutting corners has consequences, who cares about the people who live in the buildings we approve, who sees systems instead of just parts. Victoria laughed softly. Do you know how rare that is? Most consultants we hire are so focused on liability protection and code compliance that they forget actual human beings will live and work in these spaces. That's depressing. That's reality, which is why having you involved matters. She sighed, and he could picture her in that penthouse apartment, looking out at the city from 14 floors up. Marcus filed his lawsuit today, against me personally and against Hale Properties. Caleb sat up straighter. For what? Breach of contract, tortious interference, defamation. He's throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. She didn't sound scared, just tired. My lawyer says it's all baseless, that we'll get it dismissed within a month, but it's still exhausting. What can I do? You're already doing it, talking to me, reminding me why this matters. Her voice softened further. Being someone I can be honest with instead of always having to be strong. You are strong. Strongest person I know. I'm tired of being strong. Sometimes I just want to be... She trailed off. Human? Caleb supplied. Yeah. Human. Scared and uncertain and making decisions that might be wrong. Victoria laughed, but it was edged with pain. I've spent 20 years building this armor, being the CEO who doesn't flinch, who always knows the answer. And now here you are, making me want to take it off. Is that a bad thing? No, just unfamiliar. She was quiet for a moment. Caleb, can I ask you something? Anything. What are we doing? This thing between us. Because it feels important and I don't want to mess it up by assuming wrong. Caleb thought about Emma's words that morning, about Sarah's deathbed wishes, about the kiss on the sidewalk, and the way Victoria looked at him like he was worth seeing. I think we're figuring out if two people from completely different worlds can build something real together, he said carefully. I think we're both scared, and both hoping and both willing to try despite the fear. That's a good answer. I have a good teacher. My 12-year-old daughter is apparently a relationship expert. Victoria laughed, real and bright. I really do want to meet her. When you're ready. Soon, Caleb promised. She's already threatened to kick my butt if I don't let myself be happy. Apparently my late wife made her promise. Your wife sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was. Would have liked you, I think. You both had that same thing, that steel underneath the softness, that refusal to accept less than you deserve. Caleb smiled, remembering. She would have appreciated someone making me work for it instead of just letting me coast. I'm making you work for it? In the best way. Making me think about who I want to be instead of just who I have to be. He paused, making me believe I'm worth wanting. Victoria's breath caught audibly. Caleb Reed, you are absolutely worth wanting. Don't doubt that for a second. They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing, about Emma's birthday party and Victoria's lawsuit and the consulting work ahead, about small dreams and big fears and the strange mathematics of human connection that defied logic. When they finally said goodnight, Caleb sat on his balcony for another 30 minutes, feeling the night air and thinking about trajectory. About how lives could change direction based on small choices, accumulated moments, unexpected connections. About how walking into a bar 3 months ago to escape loneliness had somehow led him here. To meaningful work, to possibility, to a woman who saw him clearly and wanted him anyway. About how terrifying and wonderful it was to let yourself hope again after you'd accepted that hope was finished. Thursday came with the weight of anticipation. Caleb found himself checking the clock all day, watching hours crawl toward evening. He took extra care getting ready after work, showering thoroughly to get all the grease off, wearing his best flannel, the green one Emma insisted brought out his eyes, making sure his hands were as clean as they could be given 18 years of mechanic work. Emma watched him fuss with poorly concealed amusement. "You're nervous. Is it that obvious? Dad, you've changed shirts 3 times. It's very obvious." She grinned. "You look good, though. Very handsome." "Thanks, kiddo. Tell Victoria I said hi, and that I'm excited to meet her when you stop being scared to introduce us. I'm working on the scared part." "I know. That's why I love you." Emma hugged him tight. "Have fun. Don't come home before 10 just because you think you should. Actually enjoy yourself." Walking to Sullivan's felt different tonight. The familiar route, 6 blocks through downtown, past Emma's bus stop and the convenience store and the closed shops, felt charged with possibility. Caleb found himself walking faster, eager in a way he hadn't been since before Sarah got sick. Victoria was already there when he arrived, sitting at the bar instead of her usual table, wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of business armor. Her face lit up when she saw him, a smile so genuine it made his heart stutter. He sat down next to her, close enough their knees touched. Neither of them moved away. "Hi," Victoria said softly. "Hi yourself?" Caleb couldn't stop smiling. "You look beautiful. You look pretty good yourself." She reached out, touched his hand on the bar. "I've been thinking about you all week." "Yeah? Yeah?" About how you changed everything just by asking the right questions. About how you see me, really see me, in ways no one else does. She laced her fingers through his. "About how much I want to kiss you again." "That can be arranged," Caleb said, his voice rough. They leaned in at the same time, meeting in the middle. This kiss was different from the first, less tentative, more certain. Victoria's hand came up to cup his face, and Caleb felt the last of his defenses crumble. When they pulled apart, breathless, the entire bar was watching them, including Marcus Lang, who'd apparently chosen tonight to return to Sullivan's with his entourage. His face was twisted with contempt and something that might have been jealousy. "How touching," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The CEO and the mechanic. Like a Hallmark movie, except in real life this ends when she gets bored of slumming it." Victoria's entire body went rigid, fury replacing warmth. But before she could respond, Caleb squeezed her hand gently. "I got this," he said quietly. He turned to face Marcus with the same calm he'd shown every time. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Marcus?" "About 6 figures in annual income," Marcus shot back. "I sleep fine at night," Caleb said simply, "because I don't cut corners that put people at risk. I don't lie on permit applications. I don't build my success on fraud and hope no one notices." The bar had gone completely silent. Marcus's face flushed dark red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know you tried to save $800,000 by using inadequate foundations in flood-prone soil. I know you filed permits with false documentation. I know you're suing Victoria because she wouldn't let you risk people's lives for your profit margin." Caleb's voice stayed level, almost gentle. "And I know everyone in this bar now knows it too." Marcus looked around, seeing the judgment on faces that used to admire him, seeing his reputation crumbling in real time. "This isn't over," he said, voice shaking with rage. "Yeah, it is," Victoria said quietly, standing to face him. "Your lawsuit will be dismissed. Your reputation is ruined, and you did it all to yourself by choosing profit over people." She stepped closer to Caleb, her hand finding his. "Now get out. You're not welcome here anymore." Marcus looked between them, calculation and fury warring in his expression. Then he turned and walked out, his followers trailing behind him uncertainly. The silence stretched for another moment. Then Tommy the bartender started clapping. One person, then another, then the entire bar joined in. Victoria turned to Caleb, eyes bright with tears and triumph. "You just destroyed him in front of everyone. He destroyed himself. I just pointed it out." Caleb pulled her close, not caring who was watching. "You okay?" "More than okay." She kissed him again, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I'm perfect." They stayed at Sullivan's until closing, talking and laughing and planning. Victoria told him about the 3 projects she wanted him to consult on. Caleb told her about Emma's birthday party and how his daughter was demanding to meet her. And somewhere in the middle of cheap beer and honest conversation, surrounded by strangers who'd watched their whole story unfold, they stopped being 2 lonely people surviving their separate lives. They became something else, something real, something worth fighting for. The applause in Sullivan's faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed with Caleb for days. He'd spent 42 years being invisible, being overlooked, being the guy people forgot was in the room. And in one moment, an entire bar full of strangers had seen him, had recognized that quiet strength could be more powerful than loud performance, had witnessed him stand up for what was right without raising his voice or his fists. The following Monday, Caleb showed up for his first official consulting session at Hale Properties wearing the nicest clothes he owned, khakis he'd bought for Sarah's funeral 3 years ago, and a button-down shirt Emma had helped him pick out over the weekend. He felt like a kid playing dress-up, his work boots replaced with shoes that pinched slightly, his calloused hands scrubbed clean but still bearing the permanent stains of 18 years turning wrenches. The Hale Properties building was glass and steel and money. 14 floors of success built by a woman who'd started with nothing and refused to accept limits. Caleb stood in the lobby feeling profoundly out of place, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake accepting this job. Then Victoria stepped off the elevator, saw him, and smiled like he was the only person in the building that mattered. "You came," she said, walking toward him with purpose. "You hired me. Would have been rude not to show up." Caleb tried to match her professional demeanor, aware of the security guard watching them, the receptionist pretending not to listen. "Come on, Robert's waiting in the conference room." She touched his arm briefly, a gesture that looked professional but felt intimate. "And Caleb? Breathe. You belong here." The conference room was on the 10th floor, all windows and polished wood and the kind of furniture that cost more than Caleb's monthly rent. Robert Chen was already there, along with 2 people Caleb didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a younger man taking notes on a tablet. "Caleb, good to see you." Robert stood, shook his hand firmly. "This is Patricia Wong, our head of acquisitions, and James Miller, our junior analyst. We're looking at a potential warehouse conversion in the industrial district. Thought it would be a good first project for you." Patricia slid a folder across the table. 20,000 square foot warehouse built in 1962, been vacant for 8 years. Previous owner tried to convert it to loft apartments, but ran out of money halfway through. We're considering purchasing it and finishing the conversion. Caleb opened the folder, found architectural drawings, inspection reports, photographs of a massive brick building with good bones and obvious problems. He studied them silently, aware of everyone watching him, waiting for insight he wasn't sure he could provide. "What's your timeline?" he asked, stalling while his mind processed information. 6 months to purchase, another year for conversion if we move forward, Patricia said. "But we need to know if it's structurally sound enough to justify the investment." Caleb looked at the foundation drawings, compared them to the photos showing water damage along the base of the walls, looked at the soil report that mentioned clay composition and seasonal flooding, looked at the inspection report that glossed over drainage concerns. And he saw it. The same pattern he'd seen in Marcus's Riverside project, corners cut, problems minimized, optimism replacing due diligence. "This soil," Caleb said, pointing to the geological survey. "It's the same clay composition as the Riverside site. High expansion coefficient, poor drainage. The original foundation is showing stress fractures here, here, and here." He indicated spots in the photos where brick mortar was crumbling. "That's not age. That's soil heave from water saturation." Patricia leaned forward. "The inspection report said those cracks were cosmetic." "The inspection report is wrong, or incomplete." Caleb pulled out another photo showing the building's north side. "See this water staining? That's a consistent pattern, which means there's a drainage problem that's been ongoing for years. And if water's getting under the foundation regularly, you've got 2 choices. Complete foundation replacement, or accept that you're building apartments that'll have structural issues within 5 years. "How much would foundation replacement cost?" Robert asked. Caleb did the math in his head, estimating based on the square footage and the depth required for clay soil. For a building this size, probably 800,000 to a million, maybe more if the existing foundation needs to be fully removed rather than reinforced. The room went quiet. Patricia checked her notes. The seller's asking $2 million for the property. Another million in foundation work puts us at 2.2 before we even start the conversion. Which changes the entire financial model, James said, typing rapidly on his tablet. At that price point, the margins don't work unless we increase apartment prices significantly. Which prices us out of the market segment we were targeting, Patricia finished. She looked at Caleb with new respect. You just saved us from making a very expensive mistake. I just pointed out what was already there, Caleb said uncomfortably. The information's in the reports. Someone just needed to connect the dots. Someone did, Victoria said from where she'd been standing by the window. You. That's exactly why you're here. They spent the next 2 hours going through additional properties, Caleb offering observations that ranged from minor concerns to deal breakers. He found roof trusses that showed signs of stress, electrical systems that didn't meet modern code, plumbing that would need complete replacement. Each time he explained his reasoning in language that made sense, backing up instinct with experience. By the end of the session, Patricia was taking notes on everything he said. James was adding his concerns to their property database, and Robert was smiling like he'd just made the investment of the year. Caleb, that was exceptional, Robert said as they wrapped up. You've got a natural talent for this. I just know what breaks and why, Caleb said. Spent 18 years fixing other people's mistakes. You learn to spot the patterns. That's exactly what we need. Someone who understands failure points before they fail. Robert pulled out his phone, checked his calendar. Can you do 2 sessions next week? We've got a portfolio of properties I'd like your eyes on. Caleb thought about his schedule at Morrison's, about Emma's volleyball games and parent-teacher conferences, and the careful balance of his life. Thought about $500 an hour and what that could mean for his daughter's future. Yeah, he said, I can make that work. After the meeting ended and everyone else had left, Victoria walked Caleb to the elevator. They stood in the hallway alone, the professional masks dropping. You were amazing in there, Victoria said softly. I was terrified. You hit it well. She smiled, reached out to straighten his collar in a gesture that was pure affection. Patricia never respects anyone on first meeting. You won her over in 20 minutes. I just told her the truth. You told her what she needed to hear even though it killed a deal she'd been working on for months. That takes courage. Victoria's hand lingered on his chest. I'm proud of you. Those words again hitting him like a physical force. Thank you for believing I could do this. I believe you can do anything you set your mind to. She glanced down the hallway, checking they were still alone, then kissed him quickly. Dinner Friday night? Actually dinner, not just bar food. I want to take you somewhere nice. I don't own a suit. I don't care what you wear. I just want to spend time with you. She smiled. Emma too, if she's ready. I thought maybe we could do something fun. There's a new pizza place that has arcade games. Caleb felt his heart expand in his chest. You want to meet my daughter over pizza and arcade games? I want to meet the person who matters most to you in a setting where she feels comfortable, where we can just be people, not CEO and consultant. Victoria's eyes were vulnerable, hopeful. If that's okay. If I'm not pushing too fast. Emma's been demanding to meet you for 2 weeks. She threatened to show up at Sullivan's and introduce herself if I didn't arrange something soon. Victoria laughed, bright and genuine. I like her already. Friday night then, 6 o'clock? Perfect. I'll pick you up. You don't have to Caleb, Victoria's voice was firm. Let me do this. Let me take you and Emma somewhere nice. Let me be part of your life in a real way. He nodded, not trusting his voice, overwhelmed by the simple fact that this incredible woman wanted to be part of his ordinary life. The elevator arrived. Caleb stepped in, turned to face her. See you Friday. Can't wait. Victoria smiled as the doors closed between them, and Caleb rode down 14 floors feeling like he was floating. He spent the rest of the week in a state of nervous anticipation that Emma found endlessly amusing. She helped him pick out clothes for Friday night, his best jeans, and the green flannel she insisted Victoria liked. She asked 1,000 questions about Victoria that he answered as honestly as he could, watching his daughter process the information with her characteristic seriousness. So she's really successful, Emma said Thursday night while they were doing dishes together. Like, really rich? Yeah, really successful. Built her company from nothing. And she likes you? Like, romantically likes you? Seems to, yeah. Though I still don't quite understand why. Emma rolled her eyes. Dad, you're smart and kind and honest, and you actually care about people. Why wouldn't she like you? Because I'm a mechanic who lives in an apartment with a broken elevator and can barely afford... If you finish that sentence with something about not being good enough, I'm going to throw this dish towel at you. Emma's voice was fierce. You are enough, more than enough. And if Victoria can't see that, she's not worth your time. She does see it. That's what scares me. Ooh, good scared or bad scared? Caleb thought about it. About the way Victoria looked at him, about the consulting work, and the kiss at Sullivan's, and the careful way they were building something real. Good scared, the kind where you know something matters and you don't want to screw it up. Then don't screw it up, Emma grinned. Be yourself. That's what she likes anyway. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of early spring evening that felt like a gift. Caleb spent the day at Morrison's fighting with a particularly stubborn transmission, came home covered in grease, and immediately jumped in the shower. Emma had already changed into her favorite dress, purple with flowers saved for special occasions, and was pacing the apartment nervously. What if she doesn't like me? Emma asked when Caleb emerged from his room dressed and anxious. She's gonna love you. How could she not? What if I say something stupid? What if I'm awkward? Then you'll be 12 and occasionally awkward, which is normal. Caleb pulled her into a hug. Em, she wants to meet you because you're important to me. Just be yourself. That's always enough. Victoria arrived at exactly 6 o'clock, driving a sleek silver car that probably cost more than Caleb had earned in the last 3 years. But when she stepped out, she wasn't wearing CEO armor, just jeans and a soft sweater and a smile that made Caleb's heart stutter. Hi, she said, then turned to Emma. You must be Emma. I've heard so much about you. Emma studied Victoria with the serious intensity she brought to everything important. Dad says you're really smart and kind of scary at work, but nice in person. Victoria laughed. That's probably accurate. Your dad's pretty smart himself, and definitely kind. I know, everyone underestimates him because he's quiet. Emma's voice carried the fierce protectiveness of someone defending what mattered most. But he's the best person I know. I think so too, Victoria said softly, meeting Caleb's eyes over Emma's head. The pizza place was called Tony's, a family-run restaurant that had been serving the neighborhood for 40 years. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. The kind of place where kids could be kids, and no one cared if you wore jeans or designer clothes. They grabbed a booth in the back, ordered a large pizza with everything, and Emma immediately dragged Victoria over to look at the arcade games. Caleb watched them from the booth, his daughter explaining the mechanics of skee-ball, while Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Emma's dramatic demonstrations. They looked natural together, easy in a way that made his chest ache with hope. When they returned to the table, Emma was chattering about volleyball in school and her friend Jasmine's birthday party. Victoria listened attentively, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually engaged rather than just being polite. Your dad mentioned you're interested in engineering, Victoria said when the pizza arrived. Emma's eyes lit up. Yeah, I love figuring out how things work. Dad lets me help when he's fixing stuff around the apartment. She rebuilt our garbage disposal last month, Caleb added proudly. Found a YouTube tutorial and just did it. That's impressive. Have you thought about what kind of engineering? Victoria asked. Structural, maybe? I like the idea of designing buildings that don't fall down. Emma grinned, especially after Dad told me about that guy Marcus who tried to build apartments on bad foundations. Victoria's eyebrows rose. He told you about that? Emma's very involved in my life, Caleb said. I don't keep secrets from her. I like that. Victoria's voice was warm. My father never talked to me about his work. Made me feel like I wasn't important enough to include. That's sad, Emma said matter-of-factly. Dad includes me in everything. Sometimes I wish he'd include me less when it's stuff like bills and insurance, but mostly it's good. They ate pizza and played arcade games and talked about everything from volleyball strategy to the ethics of urban development. Emma grilled Victoria about her company with the relentless curiosity of someone who'd learned to ask hard questions. Victoria answered honestly, explaining both the successes and the compromises, the victories and the costs. At one point, Emma pulled Caleb aside while Victoria was getting more tokens for the arcade. "I like her," Emma said. "She's really smart, but not in a mean way, and she looks at you like you're special." "You think so?" "Dad, I'm 12, not blind." Emma hugged him quickly. "She's good for you. You smile more when you talk about her." When Victoria returned, she challenged Emma to a skee-ball competition that got surprisingly intense. Caleb watched them laughing and trash-talking and being genuinely happy, and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for 3 years. This was what moving forward looked like. Not forgetting Sarah or replacing her, but allowing new people into the space grief had carved out, letting joy back in alongside the sorrow. They stayed at Tony's until nearly 9, when Emma started yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired. Victoria drove them home, pulled up in front of Caleb's building with its still broken elevator and the broken concrete steps. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said. Emma's wonderful. You've done an incredible job raising her." "We've done an incredible job raising each other," Caleb corrected. "She grew me up as much as I grew her up." Emma leaned forward from the back seat. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you going to hurt my dad? Because he's been through a lot, and if you're just messing around or whatever, I'd rather know now." "Emma," Caleb started, mortified, but Victoria turned in her seat, met Emma's serious eyes directly. "I'm not messing around. Your dad is one of the best people I've ever met, and I care about him very much. I can't promise nothing will ever hurt. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I'm not playing games. This is real for me." Emma studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure." She opened the car door. "I'm going up. Dad, don't be weird about saying goodnight." She disappeared into the building, leaving Caleb and Victoria alone in the car. "I'm sorry about that," Caleb said. "She's protective." "She loves you. That's not something to apologize for." Victoria reached over, took his hand. "She's amazing, Caleb. You should be incredibly proud." "I am, every day." He squeezed her fingers. "Thank you for tonight. For including her, for treating her like a person instead of just some kid you had to tolerate." "I wasn't tolerating anything. I genuinely enjoyed spending time with her." Victoria smiled. "She's got your honesty and your strength. That's a powerful combination. She's got her mother's brilliance and determination too. Then she's going to change the world." Victoria leaned across the console, kissed him softly. "Go be with your daughter. I'll see you next week." "Thursday at Sullivan's?" "Wouldn't miss it." She kissed him again. "And Caleb?" Emma was right. "This is real for me too." The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Caleb continued his work at Morrison's while taking on consulting projects for Hale Properties 2 or 3 times a week. The money was better than he'd dreamed. Enough to fix the elevator in his building, enough to start a real college fund for Emma, enough to stop counting every dollar and calculating every expense. But more than the money, the work itself mattered. He was using his knowledge to protect people, to prevent the kind of corners cutting that put lives at risk, to make sure buildings were safe before families moved into them. Victoria integrated into his life gradually and naturally. Thursday nights at Sullivan's remained sacred, but they added Sunday brunches where Emma joined them. Victoria taught Emma about business, while Emma taught Victoria about volleyball. They became, without anyone quite planning it, something that felt like family. Marcus's lawsuit was dismissed in early May, exactly as Victoria's lawyers had predicted. The judge ruled that Victoria had acted appropriately in dissolving the partnership, that Marcus's permit application showed clear evidence of misrepresentation, and that any damages were the result of Marcus's own actions rather than Victoria's response to them. The dismissal made the business news, along with details about the foundation issues Marcus had tried to hide. Within a week, 3 major clients dropped Lang Development. Within a month, Marcus was selling assets to cover debts. Caleb felt no satisfaction in Marcus's downfall, only relief that the truth had won. that people would be protected from buildings that weren't safe, that integrity, this time at least, had carried consequences for those who lacked it. In June, Victoria asked Caleb to review plans for Hale Properties' largest project yet, a mixed-use development that would transform an entire city block. $20 million in investment, hundreds of residential units, ground floor commercial space, a community center. The kind of project that could define a career or destroy it. Caleb spent 3 weeks studying every detail, consulting with engineers and soil specialists and building inspectors. He found problems, drainage concerns, electrical capacity issues, questions about earthquake retrofitting, and worked with Victoria's team to solve each one properly. The day they broke ground, Victoria insisted Caleb be there for the ceremony. He stood next to her in his work boots and flannel while photographers took pictures and local politicians gave speeches about community development and urban renewal. "This wouldn't exist without you," Victoria said quietly, while someone from the mayor's office droned on about economic impact. "Every person who lives here will be safe because you asked the right questions. You would have found the problems eventually. Maybe, or maybe I would have been so focused on timelines and budgets that I'd have missed something critical. You kept me honest." She squeezed his hand. "You keep me honest." That night they celebrated at Sullivan's, their place, where this whole thing had started. Tommy served them the terrible $4 beer they'd bonded over. The bar that had once been filled with Marcus's mocking laughter now felt like home. "Remember the first night we talked?" Victoria asked. "You were sitting right there looking like you wanted to disappear, and I was too chicken to come over. I remember thinking you were way out of my league. I was thinking the same thing about you, that you had something I'd lost somewhere along the way." She smiled. "Turns out, I was right. What did I have? Integrity, purpose, the knowledge that success measured in anything other than how you treat people is just noise." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "You reminded me why I started this company. Not to get rich or powerful, but to build things that mattered, to make the city better. You never lost that. You just forgot it for a while. You helped me remember." Caleb wrapped his arm around her, this incredible woman who'd seen something in him when everyone else saw scenery. "You helped me remember, too, that I'm more than just a paycheck for Emma, that I have value beyond what my hands can fix." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the bar's familiar rhythms. New faces had replaced Marcus's crowd, younger professionals, more diverse, less performative. The space felt different now. Better. "Caleb," Victoria said softly, "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, 3 syllables that changed everything. "I love you too," he said, and it felt like the truest thing he'd ever spoken. "Probably have since you ordered that terrible beer just to sit next to me." She laughed, kissed him, and Caleb tasted salt from happy tears mixing with cheap beer. A year later, Caleb stood in a different kind of building, a small community center Hale Properties had donated to the neighborhood, built with proper foundations and earthquake retrofitting and every safety measure they could implement. Victoria was announcing a new initiative, a scholarship fund for students pursuing engineering degrees, with preference given to kids from working-class families. Emma sat in the front row, beaming with pride, wearing the acceptance letter from the state university's structural engineering program like a badge of honor. She'd gotten in on her own merit, but the scholarship from Victoria's fund would make it possible. "My partner and consultant Caleb Reed taught me something important," Victoria was saying from the small podium. "That the people who notice what's broken are often the ones everyone overlooks. That quiet competence matters more than loud performance. That asking the right questions can save lives." She looked directly at Caleb, standing at the back of the room in his usual flannel. "He taught me that success isn't about how much you accumulate, but about how much you protect, how much you build that lasts, how much you care when no one's watching." The crowd applauded. Caleb felt his face heat, uncomfortable with attention as always. But Emma turned around and gave him a thumbs up, and Victoria smiled at him like he'd hung the moon, and he let himself feel it, pride. Not in being recognized, but in having made a difference. After the ceremony, Emma rushed over and hugged him fiercely. "Did you hear? I got the scholarship, full tuition." "I heard, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." "None of this happens without you, Dad. Without you teaching me to ask questions and look at systems and care about doing things right. Emma pulled back, eyes bright. You changed everything just by being you. Victoria joined them, slipping her hand into Caleb's like it belonged there. Ready to go home? Home. Not his apartment or her penthouse, but the house they'd bought together 3 months ago. 3 bedrooms in a good school district with a garage where Caleb could work on cars and a study where Emma could do homework and a kitchen big enough for all of them to cook together. A foundation built on solid ground, checked and rechecked, engineered to last. Yeah, Caleb said, pulling both of them close. Let's go home. They walked out into the evening, 3 people who'd found each other in unexpected ways and built something stronger than any one of them could have built alone. Behind them, the community center stood solid and safe, a monument to what happened when you asked the right questions and refused to accept easy answers, when you valued integrity over profit and people over performance, when you stopped measuring success by how loud you could be and started measuring it by how much good you could do when no one was watching. Caleb Reed had spent 42 years being invisible, being overlooked, being dismissed as just a mechanic who didn't matter. And in the end, he'd changed an entire city's approach to development simply by seeing what others missed and having the courage to speak up. He'd done it without raising his voice, or demanding recognition, or performing for an audience. He'd done it by being exactly who he'd always been. Honest, careful, committed to doing things right even when shortcuts were easier. He'd done it by staying true to himself when everyone else was performing. And that, it turned out, was the loudest statement of all. Not the noise of ambition or the performance of success, but the quiet, steady strength of a man who showed up every day and did what mattered, who asked the right questions, who cared about the people who would live in the buildings he helped protect, who loved his daughter fiercely and loved his partner deeply and loved his work honestly, who proved that you didn't need to be loud to be heard. You just needed to be real. And in a world obsessed with performance, with noise, with the desperate scramble for attention and recognition, that authenticity was revolutionary. Caleb Reed had never tried to be revolutionary. He just tried to be good. Turned out, in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.